The story opens on an epic battlefield, the brutal culmination of a decade-long war that has ravaged the continent. But for the feared necromancer at the center of it all, the end has finally come. He groans in agony, life fading from his eyes. A holy sword is lodged squarely in his heart, a fatal blow delivered by the hands of heroes. Battered and bloody, the victorious warriors gasp for air, the relief of survival washing over them. They've done it. After 10 long years, they've finally cornered and defeated the devil of the continent, the great necromancer Archimonde. Impaled and surrounded, Archimonde glares back. He thinks back on how it all went wrong. The Great Continental War was a massive joint operation by the Allied forces. While the main Imperial army clashed with his undead legions, an elite squad of heroes infiltrated his fortress to strike him down directly. He had anticipated their every move, building what he thought was an impenetrable defense, but it all crumbled. It was his complete and utter defeat, and it was all because of one man, a single, solitary knight who broke through everything he threw at him. Leader of the Northern Knight Order, Burkle Rhineland, stands before him. Burkle tells the dying necromancer that this victory wasn't achieved by his power alone. He explains that countless people bled, endured, and sacrificed everything. Also, his sword could finally reach its target. With a solemn look, Burkle urges Archimonde to give up now, for the peace of the continent. But the word peace only enrages Archimonde. He lets out a furious roar, rejecting the hero's words. He spits that the knights are hypocrites who just stood by and watched when the plague was wiping people out, only to cry for peace, now that they're the ones in danger. Archimonde seethes, calling them all bastards, worse than dogs in his eyes. With his last ounce of strength, he begins to channel his dark energy, vowing to destroy all humans with his own hands. The other heroes panic, shocked that he can still wield necromancy even with a holy sword in his heart. They shout that he's too dangerous, and must be finished off immediately before he can unleash another catastrophe. But Burkle calmly tells his companions to stop. He turns to Archimonde, reminding him of the 20 million people who fell to the plague. 20 million souls Archimonde desecrated, turning them into his undead army and sparking this devastating war. Archimonde clenches his teeth, saying not to make him laugh. Do you think I don't know? His eyes narrow as he reveals a hidden truth. He knows for a fact that among those 20 million were people from Burkle's own hometown. This whole war wasn't for some grand ideal. It was nothing more than personal revenge. Burkle falls silent. With a heavy heart, Burkle states there is only one reason he came here. He's not fighting for glory or justice, but for the personal future of the children. The simple, selfless reason stuns the necromancer. He can only utter a confused, "What?" The knight's conviction is absolute. He explains that his own choices, hopes, and even his life are things he must leave behind for the sake of the next generation. In that moment, a profound realization dawns on Archimonde. He sees his own corrupted, hate-filled reflection in the eyes of this upright knight. It's like staring into the sun after a lifetime in darkness. He is faced with a gaze so entirely different from his own. Burkle's hand begins to glow with a brilliant, final power, declaring he is doing this for the sake of his descendants. The last of Archimonde's strength, his will to fight, drains away. He collapses to his knees in the blood-soaked snow. With a hollow voice, he tells the knight to finish him off. His comrades cry out in alarm as Burkle casually tosses the holy sword aside. He draws a different blade, one that hums with an ominous purple energy. Burkle points the dark sword at the necromancer's neck and asks if he has any last words. A faint, knowing smirk plays on Archimonde's lips. He cryptically warns the knight that a necromancer doesn't die easily, and with one swift, clean motion, Burkle takes his head. The heroes erupt in cheers as their nemesis falls. The war is over. Archimonde is dead. Beyond their celebration, the last thing Archimonde hears is the sickening thud of his own head hitting the ground. His vision fades to black. This was the end of the 10-year war, and the demise of the continent's greatest evil, or so he thought. His consciousness suddenly jolts back, not to the afterlife, but to a lavish mansion on a stormy night. Two maids are cooing over a crib. One excitedly tells the other that the young master's mouth just moved. He tries to understand what's happening, his thoughts a confused mess. Where is he? A maid greets him, asking if, young Master Klein, slept well. They hold up a golden mirror, showing him a portrait of a beautiful woman they call the Duchess, his mother. The maids try to coax him into saying his first word, Mama. But Archimonde's mind, now trapped in an infant's body, can't make it cooperate. His new body feels stiff and alien. He struggles to speak, to form words, managing only a weak MMA sound. The maids gasp in delight, thinking the baby is a prodigy who's already learning to speak. But what erupts from the baby's mouth is not Mama. It's an ancient, demonic invocation. My guardians of darkness, my servants, my soldiers, I, Archimonde, summon you, so heed my command. The maids, faces twist from joy to sheer, unadulterated terror, dropping the mirror in shock. As the baby's demonic summons echo through the room, dark lightning flashes outside, heralding the absurd and chaotic second life of the great necromancer. But that chaos eventually subsides. We flash forward a whole 15 years later, to a bright sunny day at the estate. A group of maids swoon, their faces flushed with excitement as they whisper amongst themselves, completely captivated by someone's presence. A confident stride echoes on the cobblestone path as a young man makes his way through the courtyard. The maids gossip about his striking features, from his face to his silver hair. And there he is, the subject of their admiration, Archimond reincarnated as the now 15-year-old Klein. The maids declare he's a living work of art crafted by the gods themselves. The girls continue to fawn over him, calling him blindingly beautiful and wondering just what he eats to look so good. Klein, however, seems completely unbothered by the attention, his expression as stoic as ever. But his peaceful stroll is cut short when a voice calls out, "Found you." Klein startles, turning around to see a bucket of water looming over his head. Before he can react, a burly, scarred man roars, "Begone, evil spirit," and douses him with the bucket's contents. This is Priest Garrison Veerman of the Holy Order, and apparently, this is his version of a friendly greeting. The maids who were just admiring Klein now shrink back in fear. Garrison announces that 3 of them were already bewitched, and his purification came just in time. Drenched and with a bucket now stuck on his head, Klein mutters to himself about how this priest can spout such nonsense with so much confidence. Garrison sternly explains his logic. He believes the soul of the evil necromancer Archimond rests inside Klein's body, which is why he must periodically perform these purification rituals. Klein tries to argue that he isn't Archimond, but Garrison just takes his defiant glare as Archimond's expression and promptly sprays him in the face with a bottle of holy water for good measure. Completely exasperated, Klein can only wonder if this priest is actually insane. He stomps away in disgust, muttering, "Crazy bastard," under his breath over and over again. But Garrison isn't finished yet. He points dramatically and orders his men to seize the boy. A ridiculous chase scene breaks out. Garrison declares that for his insolence, Klein will be subjected to a holy water bath, completely naked. Klein runs for his life, screaming that he's not Archimond, and questioning if the crazy priest has any humanity left. As he runs, Klein's mind flashes back. He reflects on how he never could have imagined his life would turn out like this. He remembers his original death, the face of the hero Burkle burned into his memory, and then, the strange sensation of falling into a new existence. He recalls the sheer shock of waking up in a helpless baby's body. And, of course, the fateful moment his first words were a necromancy incantation, terrifying his maids and sealing his fate. Because of that little slip-up, he was treated like a demon, and promptly shipped off to be locked up in a monastery as soon as he turned 3. It was there that he met a man claiming to be from the Holy Order, the very same priest Garrison. And Klein grimly recalls that their first meeting was only the beginning of his suffering. He was subjected to all sorts of so-called purification rituals, like Garrison's 24-hour prayer chant, which was basically just the priest screaming scriptures at him until his ears bled. Then there was Garrison's frozen garlic bath, an icy torture designed to drive out the scent of darkness. And let's not forget the fire show of purification, which was just a straight-up attempt to burn him at the stake. Fucking hell, indeed. He had to suffer through years of this creative torture, all in the name of purification, screaming for anyone to save him. Now, we snap back to the present, 5 years after he was finally released from the monastery. Klein is seen slumped on the floor, looking completely defeated after his latest encounter with Garrison. On his head is a ridiculously cute, cone-shaped party hat. His personal maid, a young girl named Aaron, kneels and prays earnestly for him. She wishes for young Master Klein to live proudly as a descendant of heroes and become a healthy member of the family. But Klein is in no mood for prayers. His eye twitches with annoyance. Finally, having had enough, he rips the hat from his head and throws it to the ground, yelling in frustration. Aaron gasps, on the verge of tears, as she sees the handmade hat she thought she made for him discarded on the floor. A pang of guilt hits Klein. He immediately regrets his outburst, thinking she must have poured her heart into making it with her tiny hands. He apologizes and bends down to retrieve it, intending to smooth things over. But, just as he's about to pick it up, Aaron quietly informs him that Priest Garrison was the one who made it. Klein's entire body freezes, his face contorting in a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. And speak of the devil, Garrison himself appears in the doorway, calling out to young Master Klein. The priest is dabbing a tear from his eye, overcome with emotion. He's genuinely moved that Klein wore the hat he'd spent an entire week painstakingly knitting. With a terrifyingly cheerful smile, Klein declares he's absolutely not wearing it, and proceeds to rip the cursed hat into tiny, irreparable pieces. Garrison's face darkens instantly as he shouts that Archimond's evil soul has appeared. Klein screams back that he wants his moment of guilt back, slamming the door in the priest's face. Just then, a man named Dunkel, the captain of the Red Chariot Knight Order, arrives and asks Garrison if the purification ritual is over. Dunkel seems skeptical of the whole situation. He points out that the rumor about Klein being Archimond is over a decade old, and even the Holy Order has cleared him of any suspicion. Suddenly, Klein, who had been sulking, lunges at Garrison and grabs his face in a comical display of aggression. Garrison, being a mountain of a man, casually swats him away like a fly while assuring the captain that everything is taken care of. Klein lies on the floor. Defeated, he thinks how that crazy bastard wouldn't pretend to listen when he spoke, but he plays along when a knight captain talks. The boy concludes that the priest is just a cunning politician. Garrison announces that he'll be taking his leave, but not before turning back with a sinister glint in his eye, adding that there's always a possibility of the evil resurfacing. Klein breaks into a cold sweat. This guy is never going to let it go. The priest finally turns to walk away, but he can't resist one last bit of torment, popping his head back in the door with a cheerful wave. He reminds Klein that the next ritual is on Friday, and tells him to wash up and be pure. Left alone, Klein pants heavily, the stress and exhaustion of dealing with Garrison finally catching up to him. He collapses onto a nearby couch in utter defeat. Fuming, he wonders aloud if it's even legal for a so-called priest to torture someone like this. He's convinced Garrison is less of a holy man and more of a muscle demon. His maid, Arin, cautiously approaches with a towel. She timidly asks him if he's really absolutely sure he isn't Archimond. Klein waves his hand dismissively, exclaiming that he's absolutely not, and that he despises even hearing that wretched name. Of course, he's lying through his teeth. In his mind, he knows if he ever admits the truth, Garrison's purification rituals will escalate to a whole new level of insane torture. He reflects on his cursed second life. Ever since he was reincarnated, he's been living under constant surveillance, his true self, a shadow that follows him everywhere. Because of a rumor started by his own foolish mistake as a baby, he was locked away in a monastery for 7 long years. And just when he thought he was free, that priest bastard followed him back to the Duke's estate. Knight, trying to be helpful, mentions that Garrison is a proxy, though he might not look like it. The maid asks what a proxy is, clearly unfamiliar with the title. Dunkel explains that it's a title given only to the strongest warrior within the entire Holy Order. He adds that, with the exception of the legendary Dukes of House Rhineland, a proxy is an unmatched and overwhelmingly powerful individual. Erin's eyes sparkle with excitement, exclaiming that the young master's family must be incredibly strong. She then turns to Dunkel with another question, asking who the strongest duke in his family is. Dunkel ponders the question with a smile. He says that while they're all great, and the current 7th Duke is the most powerful, but Klein cuts in, saying, the first. The attendant is confused, questioning if he means the 1st Duke, not Klein's father, the 7th. He tells them a firm number. He states with absolute certainty that the 1st Duke is the strongest. Dunkel is surprised by the conviction in Klein's voice, but he simply accepts his answer. Erin giggles, pointing out that the young master must like the 1st Duke the best, since he's always staring at his portrait. But Klein isn't looking at the portrait with admiration. It's something much more complicated. Dunkel casually remarks that it's hard to believe it's already been 200 years since the 1st Duke founded their family. That number hangs in the air as Klein stares at the portrait. 200 years. He thinks to himself that even now, he finds it hard to believe. But he has no choice but to accept the twisted reality he's been born into. The camera pans up a wall of portraits, showing the lineage of the Dukes of Rhineland, from the 7th to the 6th, all the way down the line, until it lands on the very first one. 1st Duke, Berkel Rhineland. And look at the irony. Archimond, the necromancer, the devil of the continent, was reincarnated as the direct descendant of the very hero who had taken his life. The next morning, he had the same dream, where he was struck down by the hero, Berkel. He jolts awake in a cold sweat, the nightmare still vivid in his mind. Panting heavily, he clutches the sheets, trying to shake off the lingering dread. Brushing it off as just a crappy dream, he tries to compose himself. He tugs at a lock of silver hair, a constant reminder of the body he's been forced into, muttering that he still can't get used to it. Suddenly, a looming silhouette in the doorway startles him. A deep voice points out that young Lord Klein talks quite heavily in his sleep. It's none other than Priest Garrison. Garrison smirks, condescendingly asking if he was dreaming of his good old days as Archimond. Klein internally curses the priest, reminding himself to play dumb in front of this psycho. He stammers, trying to come up with an excuse about just being tired lately, when a small figure latches from under the bed. She declares that she heard everything, the entire sleep-talking episode. She even starts to act it out, mimicking his supposed shouts to destroy the continent and kill them all, while Garrison watches with keen interest. Klein panics, trying to shut her up and denying he ever said such things. But before the situation can escalate further, a polite knock comes from the door. It's the butler, a man named Veerman. Garrison, hearing Arn's report, ignores the butler and practically bursts into flames, deciding that the young lord will need double the purification time now. Klein can only groan in despair as he covers Erin's mouth, realizing she just made things a whole lot worse. He growls, telling the crazy priest not to make him laugh as we transition to the Grand Rhineland estate. Veerman informs them that there's a swordsmanship demonstration, and His Grace the Duke has requested Klein's attendance. They set off through the grand halls of the manor. Klein is surprised, noting that his father has never called for him before. As they walk, Arin spots a snack Klein is holding and timidly asks if she can have it. Veerman immediately begins to scold her for making such an impertinent request of the young master. But Klein waves him off, telling him not to be so hard on the girl. He hands her the treat, and she happily munches away, much to the butler's silent disapproval. Putting the moment behind them, Klein wonders again why he was summoned. The butler explains that members of the Branch family have arrived. Klein's mood immediately sours at the mention of the Branch family. He internally labels them as annoying pests who have come to cause trouble. And sure enough, he's greeted by a crowd of foppish, sneering relatives. They spot him from across the hall, their disdain clear on their faces. They don't even bother to hide their mockery, with one of them loudly telling the others not to call him Klein, but Lord Archimond instead. Another cousin chimes in, snidely asking for stories about the 7 years he supposedly rotted away in a monastery. These are his maternal cousins from his father's side, and they're a real piece of work. He then spots another group, the ones from the Northern Branch, who seem to have come just to stuff their faces. And somewhere in the crowd are his Western cousins, including one particularly striking young woman, who watches the proceedings with an air of boredom. Klein internally notes that this particular girl is definitely something. One of the cousins snidely remarks how someone like Klein could even be a part of their Rhineland family. He ignores them completely, walking past without a second glance. This of course only angers them more, and they yell at him for ignoring his elders. He knows the only reason these unfamiliar relatives are acting so bold is simple. The prestigious Rhineland family is falling apart. The fact that they, from branch families, dare to look down on him, a direct descendant, says it all. With that thought, a swordsmanship demonstration begins in the center of the hall. Two of the cousins are sparring with wooden swords, their strikes ringing through the hall. One of them, a purple-haired boy named Dalton, gets knocked back, clearly outmatched. He glares at his opponent, Dylan, accusing him of being a bastard. He screams at Dylan to stop holding back and fight him properly, but Dylan calmly informs him that the match is already over. He effortlessly parries Dalton's clumsy attacks, showing a massive gap in their skill. His opponent, a calm, blonde-haired young man, just smiles. Klein muses that if there's any hope left for this crumbling family, it all rests on one person. That person is the eldest son of the Rhineland family, a prodigious genius, and Klein's older half-brother, Dylan Rhineland. Thanks to him, the family's reputation as a prestigious house of swordsmanship is just barely holding together. Dalton, not willing to accept defeat, gets up and screams that it'll be different this time. But it's futile. He charges in recklessly. As Klein watches the duel, something shifts. For the first time in this reincarnated body, he's witnessing swordsmanship, and his eyes begin to glow with a purple light. His eyes isn't just watching a fight, he's dissecting it. With a flash, his perception changes. He can see it all with perfect clarity. The footwork, the timing of each push off the ground, even the very flow of mana surrounding Dylan's body. Dylan unleashes a powerful move, his sword glowing with a faint blue light. It's the Rhineland family's secret technique, a powerful strike that slams into the ground with explosive force. The technique is called Meteor Sword, and Dalton is completely blown away by its power. The duel is over. Dylan stands victorious, not even breaking a sweat. He looks over his shoulder at his defeated cousin, a hint of a smirk on his face. As Sheva tells him, "If I get serious, it would be problematic for you." The standing nobles were all awestruck at the incredible display of power. They wondered aloud if that was Meteor Sword. How did he pull it off in front of these many people? It must be declaration to the branch families that Rhinelands are still very much alive. Here our boy Klein is rubbing his eyes, wondering, what was that experience? Inside the hall, someone calls out to Klein. It's Dylan. He asks, "How long have you been here?" To which Klein replies, "Not for too long." Dylan remarks that if he knew his brother was seeing the match, he would have put it in more effort. Klein looks at him and thinks, he's good looking, a great personality. He's perfect in every way. Then he asks a lingering question. Why did the branch family showed up? Are they here to leech money again? Just then a voice cuts, praising Dylan for his excellent work. This is the 7th head of the Rhineland family, Heinkel Rhineland. He is the current head of the family I was born into, my father. To him, Dylan's existence must be his source of pride. He praises his son for already mastering the family's technique. Just then, Dunkel also arrives. He compliments, saying even knights his age wouldn't dare to attempt such complex technique. He has quite overwhelming talent. Dylan, ever the model son, replies with a humble smile that he's a little embarrassed, feeling his display of power was still not enough. The Duke, Heinkel Rhineland, calls out to his son. He recites the dying words of the first Duke, the legendary hero Berkel Rhineland, declaring that a knight of Rhineland must always be the greatest in the empire. He places a hand on Dylan's shoulder, telling him to engrave those words in his heart and continue to devote himself to the family's legacy. Dylan bows respectfully, thanking his father. The Duke's attention shifts, his eyes landing on his other son. He reaches out and places a hand on Klein's head. He states flatly that he still can't feel any mana from him. Klein can only lower his head and apologize to his father. Dunkel, Klein's escort knight, quickly steps in to offer an excuse, suggesting that Klein's mana deficiency is due to the critical years he spent locked away in a monastery. The Duke simply listens, his silence speaking volumes. The surrounding relatives, seeing this pathetic display, begin to whisper amongst themselves. The rumors are true, they murmur. The second son has no mana, completely unlike his prodigious brother. They mock the incompetence of the direct line, seeing this as their chance to rise. The Duke tells Klein it's fine, that there are other paths besides the sword, but his words offer no comfort, sounding more like a dismissal of a worthless son than encouragement. Klein walks away, the insults of his family echoing in the hall. He tells himself he doesn't care what they say about him. But what truly enrages him is the disrespect they show to the legacy of Burkle, the hero who founded this family, and the man who killed Klein in his past life. He clenches his fist in silent fury. He risked his life to protect these people, and this is how they behave? A dark look crosses his face. He can't comprehend how the descendants of the great hero have become so rotten to the core. As the Duke and Dellen depart, his brother calls back, saying he'll see him later, completely oblivious to the tension Klein is feeling. Just then, Dalton, the cousin who was just humiliated by Dellen, decides to take his frustrations out on an easier target. He sneers at Klein, mocking him for being a Rhineland who can't even wield a sword. He calls Klein an absolute disgrace to the family, putting on a big show of being high and mighty, despite his own pathetic loss minutes earlier. Klein, however, is completely unfazed. He coolly asks Dalton if fooling around with girls behind the ballroom is what he considers upholding the family's pride. Dalton's smug expression evaporates, replaced by pure panic. He sputters, demanding to know how Klein found out. Klein casually reminds him that money can't silence every rumor. Calling him naive and stupid, Klein delivers a swift stomp right on Dalton's foot. With a pained yelp, Dalton collapses to the ground. That's what you get for running your mouth. Klein looks down at the pathetic cousin, noting that he's just taking out his frustration on him after getting wrecked by Dellen. Enraged, Dalton screams a curse from the floor. He crosses a line, yelling that Klein is nothing but a bastard who doesn't even know his own mother. The playful atmosphere vanishes in an instant. Klein slowly turns, a murderous aura radiating from him as he asks in a low voice, "What did you just say?" Dalton immediately realizes he's made a grave mistake. The sheer killing intent rolling off Klein is suffocating, and he breaks out in a cold sweat. For Klein, this isn't about his mother, whose face he's never even seen. It's the blatant, pathetic contempt these branch family members have for the direct bloodline that pushes him over the edge. His eyes begin to glow with a dangerous, purple light. His mind swirls with rage. How did the family of the hero who once defeated him fall into such a pathetic state? Before Klein can turn his cousin into a fine paste, Dunkel intervenes, telling Lord Dalton that is enough. Dunkel stands between them. He warns Dalton that he will not tolerate any further disrespect towards the young master. Dalton, though seething, knows he can't take on an escort knight. He clicks his tongue in annoyance. He shoves past Dunkel, spitting one last insult at Klein, telling him to be grateful his knight saved him, before scurrying away like the coward he is. Dunkel watches the fool retreat, his expression stern and unwavering. His hand rests firmly on the hilt of his sword, a silent warning to anyone else who might get any funny ideas. Klein looks at his escort knight, a new plan beginning to form in his mind. He calls out Dunkel's name, his voice calm despite the rage he just felt. Later that night, the scene shifts to a misty, secluded training ground. Klein has brought Dunkel here for a special request. Dunkel presents a steel sword to Klein, looking utterly confused as he hands it over. He asks the young master why on earth he would need a sword at this time of night, especially since he can't use mana. Klein takes the sword, ignoring the question. He takes a few experimental swings, trying to recall the exact movements Dellen made earlier in the day. Dunkel watches, realizing Klein is trying to mimic the family's secret technique, the meteor sword. Klein tells him to head back inside, saying he has something he needs to check alone. A wave of pity washes over Dunkel. He assumes the young master still can't let go of his dream of being a swordsman. He turns to leave, thinking it's a lost cause. Young Master Klein has a body completely devoid of mana, and in this world that's a death sentence for any aspiring knight. It's an unbreakable rule. Dunkel knows that the meteor sword is a technique that relies entirely on mana control. Even if Klein could perfectly mimic the physical movements, executing the actual technique is impossible without it. But as Klein stands alone in the clearing, he closes his eyes. The world around him fades, and the memory of Dellen's duel becomes strangely clear. He visualizes it all with his unique ability, the precise footwork, the exact timing of every step, every push off the ground, the perfect arc of the blade as it cut through the air, and even the invisible flow of mana that powered the technique. His eyes snap open, crackling with a violet energy. His Demon King powers are activating. Dunkel, who is just about to leave, freezes. A sudden, immense pressure washes over him, so powerful it makes his hair stand on end. He whips around, his eyes wide with disbelief. This overwhelming aura, what in the world is it? He sees Klein's body enveloped in a maelstrom of violent purple energy. Then, with a powerful roar, Klein brings the sword down, perfectly executing the meteor sword technique and smashing it into a giant boulder. The purple energy erupts, completely shattering the massive rock into dust. Dunkel can only stare, his jaw on the floor. This is impossible. A man with no mana just used their family's ultimate technique. Dunkel stammers, Barely able to speak his young master's name, a slow, wide grin spreads across Klein's face. He can't believe it. It actually worked. The next day, little maid watches on, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. Priest Garrison can only stare in utter disbelief, a single bead of sweat betraying the shock that has rendered him speechless. The scene cuts abruptly to a far less epic moment, as Klein's head is being forcefully held down in a bucket of cold water. Garrison proudly declares that the young master's training is progressing well. He can now hold his breath underwater for over a minute. Auden, ever the supportive maid, cheers that her master is basically a fish now. Finally allowed to surface, Klein gasps for air, looking less like a fish and more like a drowning cat. As Garrison seriously considers using a fish tank for the next purification ritual, Klein explodes, demanding to know why this torture is taking even longer than usual. Garrison calmly informs him that the ritual is over, explaining with a chuckle that he'd felt a particularly ominous aura coming from Klein's room today. As the servants help him recover, Aaron sweetly offers him a towel. Their strange morning routine is interrupted by Dunkel bearing a letter. He announces that an invitation has arrived from Lord Dalton. Klein, still soaked and confused, asks who that is, the name barely registering. Dunkel reminds him that Dalton is the cousin who was humiliated by Dellen the other day. Apparently, he wishes to apologize for his rude behavior at the training grounds. An apology? Klein is immediately suspicious, recalling the insults the little weasel threw at him. He opens the letter and discovers it's an invitation to a hunting competition. In the background, Aaron demonstrates her own unique form of cleaning by face-planting onto the floor. Klein's eyes narrow. The apology is clearly a flimsy excuse. Dalton is definitely planning something and needs a pretext to lure him out. Dunkel asks if he's planning to go. Klein gives a slight smirk. There's absolutely no reason to refuse. After all, since that night at the training grounds, he's discovered a new ace up his sleeve. His gaze drifts to the sword resting against the wall, a reminder of his breakthrough. He replays the memory of Dellen's swordsmanship in his mind, analyzing every detail. It was then he realized something incredible about his new body and old powers. He now knows, with absolute certainty, that he can perfectly replicate any technique he has seen at least once. After a moment of silence, Dunkel simply says he understands and will prepare the carriage. However, Garrison steps in. Hearing the words, hunting competition, he immediately offers to accompany the young master. Klein is not having it. He vehemently refuses, pointing accusingly at the priest and demanding to know what nonsense he's plotting now. Priest reminds Klein of their conversation. Priest simply states that for some reason, he feels an unusually ominous aura surrounding the day's events, and so his mind is made up. The carriage sets off towards the western forest, with Klein's uninvited priest in tow. The journey is far from smooth, as the carriage rattles along the rough, unpaved forest path. Inside, Aaron has succumbed to a severe case of motion sickness and is sleeping peacefully on Garrison's lap. Seeing Aaron's green-tinged face, Klein sighs, telling her she shouldn't have come. He then offers his own pillow. He explains that the western forest terrain is notoriously hard on first-time travelers. Garrison is momentarily stunned into silence by this small act of kindness. He becomes genuinely emotional, his eyes welling up as he thinks about how much the young master has matured. Klein then turns furious, saying, "That pillow is for Aaron, not you, bastard." He turns his attention to the passing scenery, a distant look in his eyes. He remarks internally that this place has changed a lot. He remembers the last time he was here, 200 years ago. It wasn't a lush forest, but a frozen wasteland covered in the snow and the corpses of his enemies. He marvels at how the land has recovered, the ice sheet of his past now a verdant landscape. It's a testament to the power of his old rival, the hero Burkle. As expected of the man who killed him, his trip is cut short as the Dunkel announces their arrival. They pull up to a massive, opulent building, the Cornwell family estate. Stepping out, Klein takes in the view. So this is where that punk Dalton lives. He can't help but notice that the Branch family's mansion is even more extravagant than the main Rhineland estate, home to one of the Empire's 3 great duchies. All this wealth is being flaunted for a simple hunting competition for children. Klein scoffs at the decadence. Suddenly, a familiar, slimy voice calls out his name, snapping him out of his thoughts. It's Dalton, looking smug as ever, flanked by a pack of snarling, half-starved hounds. He greets Klein with a sneer, boasting about the estate's high ceilings and thick walls. He then gloats that this was all built with money they'd squeezed from Klein's direct family line, mocking him for being too naive to understand how the world works after being locked away for 7 years. But Klein isn't listening. His eyes are fixed on the hounds. They're all skin and bones, clearly emaciated. He cuts Dalton's monologue short, coolly asking when this hunting competition devolved into chat time. Dalton just laughs, calling him an impatient bastard. He tells Klein he's prepared something special and to watch closely. With a flourish, Dalton unleashes the hounds, which go charging off into the grounds. He explains his twisted game. He scattered fresh meat all over the mountain to act as bait. The starving dogs, with their incredible sense of smell, immediately catch the scent and begin a frantic search for food. As the crazed beasts run wild, Dalton draws a bow, a sickeningly cruel grin spreading across his face. An arrow flies, finding its mark not in a wild boar or a deer, but in one of the emaciated dogs. This isn't a hunt. It's a massacre. As Dalton and his cronies use the starving animals as live target practice, the villain laughs maniacally, cackling with glee as he congratulates himself on a successful hunt. Just then little Erin wanders the halls, calling out for her young master. Dalton spots her. He recognizes her as the maid who's always with Klein. He approaches with a predatory look, patting her head and wondering aloud what use a little brat like her is to anyone. His smile turns into a lecherous sneer as he tells her he'll give her something else to do. But his victory is short-lived. A hand, strong as iron, suddenly clamps down on his wrist, stopping him cold. It's Klein. His voice is dangerously low as he tells Dalton to let her go. He adds a chilling warning before he breaks his arm. Dalton scoffs, wrenching his wrist from Klein's iron grip. He pushes Klein, yelling at him to stop acting so tough. Scrambling onto a nearby horse, Dalton flashes a crazed, shark-toothed grin, daring Klein to follow him. But before giving chase, Klein turns back to the loyal Dunkel, a serious look on his face. He hands his attendant a strange, ancient-looking scroll, revealing he has a backup plan. The item is identified as a signal magic scroll, a one-time used artifact capable of sending a signal even without mana, simply by tearing the paper. Klein explains his plan, voicing his suspicion of the priest who insisted on coming. He tells Dunkel that if Garrison suddenly disappears, it's a sure sign that something has gone terribly wrong. In that event, Dunkel is to tear the scroll immediately. A linked crest will then appear on Klein's hand, alerting him to the danger. With his contingency set, Klein mounts a horse and gallops after Dalton, leaving a stunned Dunkel. As dust settles, the sky darkens, painting an ominous backdrop for the impending confrontation. Klein rides hard through the western forest, easily tracking the trail left by his cowardly cousin. He knows Dalton couldn't have gotten far. It's only a matter of time before he catches up. He finally arrives at a clearing, only to find Dalton casually waiting for him, licking his sword amidst the corpses of the dogs he slaughtered earlier. The villain mockingly welcomes Klein, commenting that he's a little late to the party. Klein dismounts, his eyes cold as he scans the grim scene. He calmly asks what fresh hell Dalton is trying to pull. The ground is littered with the lifeless bodies of the hounds, a testament to Dalton's cruelty. Dalton stands with his own blade drawn, a twisted smile on his face. He announces that this is the grand finale of today's so-called competition. The two cousins face off in the moonlit clearing. Dalton's true colors are finally revealed as he declares that Klein is the last prey he intends to hunt tonight. Dalton cackles, explaining his plan in detail. He's going to cut off Klein's head, present it to Dellen, and prove once and for all that the Rhineland family is nothing but a joke, an empty shell with no power. As if on cue, a horde of armed men emerges from the shadows, surrounding Klein. Dalton gloats that once he's gone, the entire dukedom will belong to the Branch family. Archers knock their arrows, their bows aimed squarely at Klein. Dalton tells him to curse his own stupid family for his fate. He grins manically, picturing the headlines declaring that the Rhineland young master died as nothing more than dog food. But as Dalton rants, Klein's gaze becomes distant. His expression is anything but fearful. He thinks to Burkle's words, "I'm doing this for the future my descendants." A small, knowing smile begins to form on his lips. And then, to Dalton's utter astonishment, Klein throws his head back and lets out a roaring, unhinged laugh that chills the very air. Dalton is completely thrown off. He stammers, asking if Klein has finally lost his mind. Why is he laughing in the face of death? Klein clutches his face, his laughter echoing through the silent forest, as if he's just heard the most hilarious joke in existence. He finally gets a hold of himself, his eyes burning with a cold fire. He explains that it's just so funny to see a reckless brat acting so arrogant, completely oblivious to who he's messing with. Dalton's bravado falters, replaced by a creeping dread. He has no idea what's happening. Klein's eyes glow a vibrant crimson as he speaks in a voice that seems centuries old. He reveals that this very family, this land, was built upon the sacrifice of his own life. And Dalton dares to mock it? An immense, swirling vortex of turquoise energy erupts from Klein's body, blasting outwards with terrifying force. Dalton screams in pure terror. He can't understand it. He knows for a fact that Klein has no mana, so how is this magic possible? Klein calmly corrects the terrified boy. This isn't magic. It's something far older, far more powerful. It's magi. Dalton's hired goons are in a full-blown panic, screaming in confusion, as they're battered by the immense pressure. Dalton's eyes widen as a horrifying realization dawns on him. Wait, did Klein just say, magi? A wicked smirk spreads across Klein's face as he begins to chant. I calls upon the evil spirits, buried by the passage of time, to awaken. I shall raise you up, and bring you into the light. From this moment, in my name, I command you anew. The ground itself begins to writhe and crack, pulsing with a sickly turquoise light as skeletal hands claw their way up from the dirt. Dalton's mind shatters. He recognizes the name he screams into the night, Archimond. An entire legion of skeletal warriors, the legendary Archimonde, rises from the earth, their eye sockets burning with malevolent red light as they surround their new master. With a look of pure, ecstatic villainy, Klein gives his final command. Until none are left of their resentful souls, devour them all. A haunting memory resurfaces, one Klein thought he had forgotten. Battlefield filled with skulls. 200 long years have passed since those days. But even after 2 centuries, the feeling lingers. The spectral hands of the dead are still reaching for him, their voices calling out his name. It is a nostalgic sensation, a resonance with the fallen, the afterimages of countless battles and the weight of memories flooding back into his soul. He clenches his fist, embracing the familiar dark energy. The power he once wielded feels as natural as breathing. Across the clearing, Dalton's mind is completely shattering. He screams that this is ridiculous, that it simply can't be happening. But it is. Before him stands Klein, no longer a helpless young master, but the commander of an undead legion, the legendary Archimonde. With a chillingly calm smile, Klein confirms the terrified boy's worst fears. Yes, he was indeed once called by that name. Dalton's hired goons can't believe what they're hearing. Archimonde? They thought that was just some ancient rumor, a fairy tale to scare children. They stare at the silent, skeletal army, their minds struggling to comprehend the impossible sight before them. What in the world are these things? A single undead warrior turns its head, its eye sockets glowing with an eerie, malevolent light, sending a shiver down their spines. Dalton can only stare, his face a mask of utter shock and confusion, his brain having short-circuited. But the mercenaries, fear quickly turns to foolish bravado. They erupt in laughter, mocking the appearance of the skeletal soldiers, calling them a bunch of boneheads. Klein remains silent, looking down as if listening to the ramblings of ignorant children. Their mockery doesn't even register as an insult. Dalton, trying to regain some composure, dismisses the skeletons as trash. One of his men agrees, boasting he's smashed hundreds of skeletons on missions, though he admits these ones look a little different. The overconfident thugs joke about taking a bone home as a souvenir, their laughter echoing through the clearing. Dalton points forward, ordering his men to clear a path by taking care of the skeletons first. His archers follow the command, drawing their bowstrings taut, ready to unleash a deadly volley. But as they take aim, Klein stands surrounded by skeletons. A mercenary with a heavy crossbow grins, confident his bolt will tear through anything Klein can summon. With a final yell from Dalton, the men fire, loosing a hailstorm of arrows and crossbow bolts straight at Klein. The arrows are inches from his face, a deadly cloud, about to turn him into a human pincushion. But they never reach him. The volley stops dead in its tracks, embedding itself into an unseen barrier. Dalton cackles, believing his attack was a success. He gloats that poor Klein must be a bloody pulp by now. But as the dust settles, his laughter dies in his throat. His eyes widen in disbelief at what he sees. The entire volley of arrows was effortlessly blocked, not by a magic barrier, but by a massive, black shield. The shield is being held by the skeletal warriors, who has moved to stand guard in front of its master. It and several others have formed an impenetrable wall. Klein smirks. It's been 200 years, he muses, so it's not surprising that no one recognizes these skeletons. Dalton's men are in a full-blown panic now. They scream in confusion, asking where the shields came from, swearing the skeletons didn't have them a moment ago. Klein condescendingly informs them that their assessment would be correct if these were just normal, run-of-the-mill skeletons. With an ice-cold stare, he delivers the final, terrifying truth. His skeletons are different. Dalton's face contorts with dawning horror. He's finally realizing he didn't just pick a fight with his cousin. He provoked a legendary monster. Klein speaks to the memory of Berkel, telling him to watch closely. He then gives a command, ordering the Archimonde to release their first defensive formation. He thinks of the Berkel who killed me to protect the North, that these very men insulted and mocked. He clenches his fist. They will now see firsthand how those who disrespect his legacy are crushed by his hands. With a single, final command, Klein orders the attack. Charge. The entire legion of the undead surges forward as one. Dalton can only stammer in terror. As the skeletal army rushes towards his men with unnatural speed, he screams in disbelief. Skeletons can't run. This is impossible. It defies all logic and reason. His mercenaries, once so cocky, are now in chaos. The command to hold formation is useless, as the tide of bone and death crashes into them. The slaughter begins. The first man falls, a skeletal blade plunged through his chest, his life ending in a choked gurgle. It's not a battle. It's a massacre. The Archimonde warriors tear through the mercenaries, their superior strength and otherworldly nature making a mockery of the human soldiers. The one-sided slaughter sends Dalton into a full-blown panic. The chaos is merely a symphony of his own making, and Klein is about to add a new instrument. Klein issues a quiet command for the second crossbow unit to surround them. Up in the trees, Dalton's own archers look on in confusion, suddenly noticing shadowy figures moving into position alongside them. And then, they see them. More skeletons, cloaked in black, armed with massive, bone-crafted crossbows. The remaining mercenaries can only scream. Ranged attackers? Their last hope of holding a defensive line shatters as they yell for everyone to run. With a simple, cold command to fire, Klein seals their fate. A second volley, this time from the undead, streaks through the forest. There's nowhere to run. The bolts rain down, piercing through the panicked crowd of mercenaries. Dalton grits his teeth, muttering that this is ridiculous. These aren't the weak, mindless skeletons he's fought before. There's something else entirely. Finding a surge of adrenaline, Dalton screams at his men to drop their bows and switch to close-quarters combat, a last-ditch effort to regain control. But his orders are lost in the sounds of battle and terror. No one is listening. Dalton, realizing he's on his own, lashes out wildly at the nearest undead soldier. With a surprisingly clean swing, he slices the skeleton's head from its shoulders. For a fleeting moment, he feels a spark of victory. He maniacally laughs, screaming that it worked and telling everyone to aim for the heads. But his laughter dies in his throat as the skeleton with severed head swings the blade at Dalton. A wave of pure, unadulterated shock washes over Dalton's face. His brain simply cannot process what he's seeing. Klein just smirks, enjoying the lesson he's about to teach. He mentally explains that most people foolishly believe cutting off a skeleton's head is enough to kill it. The headless body staggers to its feet, proving that theory very, very wrong. Before Dalton's horrified eyes, the skeleton lifts its own head back to its neck. Dark energy swirls and stitches the bone back together, and the eyes flare back to life with a malevolent orange glow. Dalton is speechless. He stammers, unable to believe a creature could just reattach its own head. Klein internally explains the truth. These are spiritual bodies summoned with magi. They don't die so easily. This was the secret to how he, Archimonde, swept across the entire continent. The remaining mercenaries are trembling, muttering in fear. What the hell are these things? Why do they just keep coming back? He notes that with his current, weaker body, summoning 11 of these soldiers is his absolute maximum. But as he looks at the terrified fools before him, he knows it's more than enough. The last of the mercenaries can only whimper in absolute terror, their will to fight completely gone. As the sounds of battle fade into the night, the scene shifts far away, to a peaceful night at a lavish estate, where water trickles from a grand fountain. Here, Priest Garrison is telling stories to Irene. He recounts a tale from the young master's time at the monastery, and Aaron erupts in laughter, finding it hilarious. He smiles warmly, noting how much she seems to adore the young master. Aaron, her cheeks puffed up with cookies, admits that obviously she thinks the young master is wonderful. He's kind and sweet, a statement that couldn't be further from the truth as a skeleton brutally impales another screaming man. She even gushes about how he shared his cookies with her. She finishes by declaring that he's the warmest person in the world. Back in the forest, Dalton is on the edge but not yet finished. He swings his sword desperately. He manages to shatter another skeleton's head, but it's a pointless gesture. Black tendrils of magi instantly begin to knit the bones back together. Gritting his teeth in pure rage, Dalton curses the bone bastards. He realizes his only hope is to somehow stop them from regenerating. And then it hits him. The key isn't the skeletons, it's the summoner. If he can just take out Klein, the undead should fall. Ignoring the skeleton, he lunges forward, mustering every last bit of his strength. He screams Klein's name. Roaring at him to stop playing dead, Dalton raises his sword high, determined to end this one way or another. He brings his sword down with a powerful swing, aimed directly at Klein's head, but Klein's eye flashes open, now glowing with a sinister purple energy. His unique ability has been activated. With the power of his eye, he can see and recall any technique he's witnessed. Dalton freezes, his eyes wide with shock. He recognizes the energy, the stance. It's the secret art of the Rhineland family, the meteor sword. With perfect precision, Klein mirrors the technique, unleashing a powerful slash of his own. Dalton can only ask, huh? As his mind fails to comprehend how his pathetic cousin could possibly. With his eyes glowing, Klein leans in close. He informs his cousin that a peaceful death is a luxury he will not be afforded. The judgment, he proclaims with terrifying finality, begins now. With a final, sickening cough, Dalton's body hits the forest floor. Klein internally monologues that Dalton was right about one thing. The surest way to defeat a necromancer is to kill the caster. It was this exact weakness that led to the original Archimonde's defeat. The power of magi that courses through Klein's veins is immense, but it carries that same fatal flaw. If the user dies, the undead army falls. But ironically, the very thing protecting Klein from that weakness is the power of hero. He reflects on the beautiful poetry of it all. The blood of his enemies, the very power they wielded, has only made him stronger. He now fully accepts his new identity as Klein Rhineland. Down on the ground, Dalton is completely bewildered by what Klein is talking about. His eyes, wide with confusion and fear, dart around as he tries to process his cousin's cryptic words, but his consciousness fades. Looking down at the carnage, Klein makes a silent vow, the hero Burkle. He promises to look forward, because he is going to rebuild their ruined family, piece by bloody piece. Suddenly, Dalton's eyes flutter open. A groan escapes his lips as he slowly comes to. He finds himself in an oppressive, pitch-black void. He can't see anything, and as he tries to move, he feels the cold, hard bite of metal around his wrists. Looking down, he sees his ankles are also tightly shackled. He's completely restrained. The darkness recedes, revealing his new prison, a terrifying, spike-adorned chair. A cold dread seeps into his bones as he frantically tries to understand what fresh hell this is. A calm voice cuts through his panic, noting that he's finally awake. Dalton looks up to see a dark, imposing figure standing before him. The figure reveals himself to be none other than the legendary necromancer Archimond. He explains that Dalton has died and arrived in the afterlife, an afterlife that Archimond himself created. Dalton can only stare, dumbfounded. Archimond's afterlife? The concept is so absurd his brain can't even begin to process it. Archimond confirms his statement, and with the chilling tone of a judge, begins to list Dalton's earthly sins. He recalls how Dalton used to starve and torture dogs for his own sick pleasure. He would call it hunting, but it was nothing more than sadistic abuse, finding joy in shooting the helpless creatures with arrows. Archimond remembers the look of pure, manic glee on Dalton's face as he engaged in his cruel hobbies, a look that is now forever etched into the annals of this grim afterlife. Dalton finally snaps out of his shock, screaming that it's all nonsense and demanding that Archimond release him at once. But as he shouts, his mind races, and a horrifying realization begins to dawn on him. He stops mid-rant, his eyes wide with a new kind of terror. He clearly remembers the feeling of Klein's blade cutting him down. He remembers the sharp, final pain of death. He looks down at his own body completely unharmed, and his blood runs cold. If he died, why is he perfectly fine? Archimond delivers the bone-chilling truth. Dalton is already dead. What he is experiencing now is simply his karma, a chance to feel the suffering he inflicted upon others. As Dalton continues to deny reality, Archimond states that his belief is irrelevant. His hand begins to glow with an ominous blue energy. The time has come for Dalton to pay for his sins. Behind Archimond, dozens of spectral hounds materialize from the darkness, their eyes glowing with a terrifying, vengeful light. They are the souls of the dogs Dalton tormented in life. The color drains from Dalton's face. He's paralyzed with fear, trapped in his chair as the ghosts of his victims surround him. Archimond tells him to listen closely to the howls of the lives he so cruelly took. With a collective snarl, the spectral pack lunges forward, swarming the helpless Dalton, ready to exact their long-awaited revenge. As their ethereal teeth and claws tear at his soul, Archimond delivers one final chilling message. Dalton must remember that this hell is a place of his own making. His agonizing screams echo through the void, a symphony of karmic retribution. He begs and pleads, but in this realm of judgment, there is no mercy to be found. A single, pathetic tear rolls down his cheek, as his mind shatters under the weight of his own cruelty being returned to him 1,000-fold. Back in the real world, Dalton's physical body lies dead on the forest floor. His eyes are wide and vacant, a white foam frothing at his lips. His judgment is complete. Klein looks down at the scene. The chaos finally settled. The forest is quiet once more. One of his skeleton soldiers lets out a guttural screech, snapping Klein out of his thoughts. Klein turns to his loyal soldier. He acknowledges that it followed his orders perfectly, and now it's time to repay that loyalty. With a wave of his hand, he declares that as a reward, he will break the curse binding the skeleton's soul and grant it true freedom. The soldier begins to glow and dissolve into beautiful particles of turquoise light. Klein watches as the soul is finally laid to rest, its essence scattering into the night wind. He muses to himself that true death is when one's bones are shattered and scattered, a permanent end. It makes him wonder about his own fate. If that's true death, then why was he, Archimond, brought back to life? What is his purpose here? His existential crisis is cut short by a new voice from the trees. A mysterious, cloaked figure remarks on how unexpected it is to see young Master Klein practicing necromancy. Klein's head whips around, his guard instantly up. Who is this man? And how much did he see? He demands to know the intruder's identity, but the man simply replies that it doesn't matter, as Klein won't be able to remember anyway. A swirl of green energy erupts from the stranger's hand. The mysterious energy washes over the battlefield, flowing into the corpses of the mercenaries Dalton had hired. One by one, the dead men's eyes snap open, now glowing with the same eerie green light. With unnatural, jerky movements, the dead mercenaries begin to rise. Klein's eyes widen in shock and recognition. He knows this technique. It's the art of corpse revival. He realizes that this mysterious man is a necromancer. The stranger smirks, commenting that while Dalton may have been a failure, his men will make for some very useful corpses. The scene shifts from the bloody forest to the stately Rhineland manor. Aaron calls out to Dunkel to come, as Priest Garrison is recounting a funny childhood story about Klein. But Dunkel is in no mood for laughter. He waves her off, his expression grim and his mind clearly weighed down with worry. His attention is fixed on a tattered piece of parchment Klein had given him, a signal magic scroll, a tool meant only for the most dire of emergencies. Dunkel's unease grows with every passing moment. It's been 3 long hours since Klein and his cousin Dalton ventured into the forest, and there has been no word from either of them. Deciding he can't wait a second longer, Dunkel prepares to ride out, only to be stopped by 2 guards. The men try to stall him, claiming the hunting competition is still ongoing, but Dunkel isn't buying their excuses. His eyes narrow, scanning the men with growing suspicion. That's when he sees it. The crest on their armor isn't the Rhineland sigil. It's the bull of the Conwell family. These aren't allies, they're Dalton's men. Dunkel's voice becomes ice. He reminds them exactly who he is, the commander of the Rhineland family's night order, and young Master Klein's personal escort. With a gaze that could cut steel, he warns them that if they dare to get in his way again, he will not stand idly by. The two guards can only swallow their fear, realizing they've severely underestimated the man in front of them. Dunkel turns to Erin, his tone softening slightly. He instructs her to go back to the mansion with the priest, where it's safe. Erin looks on, her face a mask of confusion and concern. But she delivers a shocking piece of news that makes Dunkel's blood run cold. The priest is gone. He left suddenly, without a word, looking extremely serious. Dunkel freezes. He remembers Klein's ominous warning, that the priest was suspicious, and if he disappeared, it meant trouble was brewing. Cursing under his breath, he leaps onto his steed. The pieces of the puzzle are falling into place, and they form a terrifying picture. It was a trap all along. Without a moment's hesitation, Dunkel rips the signal scroll with his teeth, activating its magic. He spurs his horse into a desperate gallop, racing toward the forest, certain that his young master is in mortal danger, and he couldn't be more right. Back in the forest, Klein finds himself cornered, facing an army of the dead. Worse still, his reserves of magi are completely depleted from the intense battle with Dalton, leaving him unable to use his necromancy. A bead of sweat rolls down his temple. He knows he's in a bad spot and can't last long against this undead horde. The mysterious necromancer, sensing victory is at hand, points a commanding finger towards Klein. He gives his corpses a single chilling order: eliminate young Master Klein. The zombies lurch forward, a wave of death. But just as they close in, Klein clenches his fist, a defiant smirk playing on his lips. This fight is far from over. Signal magic symbol flares to life around his hand. He scoffs at his opponent. Did he really think they were the same just because they both command the dead? What a laughable assumption. With a glint in his eye, Klein gives the cloaked figure a simple message. You are so screwed. The enemy necromancer can only stare in disbelief. What is this power? Where is it coming from? Before he can process what's happening, the entire battlefield is engulfed in a blinding, roaring pillar of golden light. This is no dark art. It's a divine purge. The reanimated corpses are instantly incinerated, their corrupted forms returning to dust in the holy flames. The source of this incredible power is revealed. It's the priest, Garrison, looking less like a humble clergyman and more like a battle-hardened inquisitor. He chants a prayer, calling upon the light to grant eternal rest to the dead. As the divine light fades, Garrison's imposing silhouette stands over the battlefield. The cloaked necromancer is completely shell-shocked. He demands to know the identity of this person. The man introduces himself as Garrison Veerman. A proxy of the Holy Order is here to pass judgment on the darkness. The necromancer is shell-shocked. A proxy of the Holy Order? We get a quick lore drop on who these guys are. Known as the proxies, they are 3 living weapons who serve as the Pope's personal executioners. They are, without a doubt, the strongest military force in the entire Holy Order. Legends spoken of in hushed tones. Among their ranks, each proxy is a one-man army, said to have the power to level an entire fortress on their own. And one of them, the strongest in pure martial prowess, is standing right in front of Klein. The enemy necromancer can only shield his face, getting blasted by the holy aftershock. Klein can only watch as his unexpected, and frankly terrifying, backup arrives. Garrison flashes a confident smirk. He tells the young master not to worry, for he has arrived. The undead, mindless and driven by dark magic, continue their shambling advance, completely unaware that they're walking into a holy meat grinder. The zombies let out guttural roars, their glowing eyes filled with malice, but it's completely useless against the agent of divine wrath. Garrison uses his holy book, not for preaching, but for bludgeoning. He smashes a zombie's face in with the literal word of God. He moves like a storm, a whirlwind of holy light and devastating physical blows, tearing through the undead horde like they're made of paper. His eyes glow with righteous fury as he declares judgment upon the sinners. He tells them to beg and plead, and in return, he will grant them a baptism of fire. He promises to wash away their sins, a promise he keeps by literally exploding a zombie's head with a holy infused punch. The last of the undead make a final desperate charge, hoping to overwhelm him with numbers. Garrison simply plants his feet on the ground, pushes himself with great force. With fists glowing with divine energy, he meets the wave of death head-on, the heads of the undead in an instant move. With a cold, hard look, he tells his victims that what he's doing is both mercy and judgment. The enemy necromancer can only watch in horror. This is insane. Why is a proxy of the Holy Order here? This level of power is just absurd. Surveying the scene, he sees his entire undead army wiped out in seconds by a single man. The tables haven't just turned. They've been flipped, smashed, and set on fire. Panic sets in. He curses, yelling that this wasn't part of the plan. With his tail between his legs, he makes a break for it, but escape is not an option. A voice calmly asks where he thinks he's going, and the necromancer turns to see Garrison lifting him by his head with a single hand. He's trapped. The necromancer lets out an ear-piercing shriek, his face contorted in pure, unadulterated terror. Garrison looks down on the pathetic creature. He coolly informs the man that he's not done yet. He hasn't even finished the prayer. Tears of blood and terror stream from the necromancer's eyes as Garrison tells him to be thankful for the judgment he is about to receive. With a final declaration, "In the name of the light," Garrison delivers makes his grip stronger, blasting the head in a spray of blood. It knocked his eyeball clean out of its socket. Klein has been watching this entire holy beatdown, a single bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. With the immediate threat neutralized, Garrison calmly walks towards Klein. Klein looks up at the approaching priest, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Garrison reaches out a hand, still stained with the dark blood of the undead he just obliterated. He grabs Klein's shoulder, and our young master can't help but flinch. Garrison smiles, explaining that he sensed the energy of necromancy and rushed over immediately. His gaze sharpens, locking onto Klein with unnerving intensity. The powerful necromantic energy he sensed, it doesn't seem to have come from the defeated enemy over there. Klein's blood runs cold. He can feel the killing intent radiating from him. One wrong move, and he's dead. But just as the standoff is about to explode into violence, a rider appears in the distance, screaming Klein's name. The timely interruption comes from Dunkel, Klein's loyal subordinate, who's just arrived on the scene. Garrison's death grip loosens slightly as he and Klein both turn towards the sound. The tension finally breaks, and the strain of using his powers hits Klein all at once. Blood trickles from his lips as his body starts to give out. Dunkel leaps off his horse and sprints across the blood-soaked ground as he sees his young master swaying on his feet. He reaches Klein just in time to catch him as he collapses. Seeing the carnage and the state of his master, he frantically asks what in the world happened. Weakly, Klein tells him to quiet down, his legs have given out. But Dunkel has another pressing question. Where is Lord Dalton? With a grim expression, Klein gives a chillingly simple answer. He killed him. The story then flashes forward, not to the immediate aftermath, but to a grand estate. It seems Klein's actions have landed him in some very hot water. Inside a formal hall, a hand slams down on a table in rage. The accusation against Klein is being debated, and not everyone is happy. This is Count Delkin Conwell, the father of the deceased Dalton. He's absolutely losing it, refusing to believe his son would do anything wrong. He stands before a council of nobles, furiously defending his son's honor. He claims it's impossible for his son, a proud knight, to be an assassin, and that Klein is framing him. Presiding over the meeting is Klein's father, the Duke Heinkel Rhineland. He calmly states that despite long hours of intense interrogation, Klein has not once changed his statement. And then, he drops the first piece of evidence. He holds up a document, telling the court that there's more to the story than the Count is letting on. It's a record, bearing the Conwell family seal, showing that their domain dispatched 20 private mercenaries right around the time Klein and Dalton disappeared. It seems Dalton was definitely plotting something. The Count starts sweating bullets. He can't believe they were so sloppy. Internally, he curses his men for leaving evidence behind. But he's not ready to give up yet. In front of the entire assembly, he shifts his tactics. Even if Dalton was plotting something, it doesn't make sense. Other nobles start to murmur in agreement. They point out that Dalton was a skilled knight, while Klein is famously useless with a sword. Even Heinkel confirmed Klein has zero magic power. So how could he have possibly killed Dalton? The Count sees his opening and takes it. His plan is falling apart, but if it comes out that his son tried to kill a direct lineage lord, his entire family is finished. So he decides to change his approach entirely, going on the offensive with a wicked grin. If he can't defend his son, he'll just have to destroy Klein's credibility. He begins a vicious character assassination, reminding everyone that Klein is the son of Archduchess Claire, a woman who was surrounded by bizarre rumors her entire life. Heinkel glares, warning the Count to watch his words, but the man is on a roll. The Count continues his tirade, spitting venom. He brings up Klein's childhood, how the boy used to run around claiming he was the Archimand. How can they trust the word of a known delusional against his honorable, knightly son? But before he can land his finishing blow, a calm voice cuts him off. The Count freezes. That voice, it couldn't be. All eyes turn to the entrance, where Klein himself descends the stairs, looking dapper in a suit and completely unfazed by the accusations. He coolly states that he's been listening to the Count's drivel. He lays out the facts. Dalton hired mercenaries, tried to kill him, and he merely killed him in self-defense. He even adds that an unknown assailant turned them into undead before Father Garrison of the Holy Order arrived to help. The Count can only stammer that it must be a lie. A dangerous smirk plays on Klein's lips. He asks a simple question. If that's a lie, then is the fact that he is Archimand a lie too? The Count recoils, clutching his head as if struck by a psychic blow. Klein made a vow when he killed Dalton. He will rebuild the family that was built upon his own death, and he will not stand to see it dirtied by vermin. Just as Klein is about to make his next move, a sharp knock echoes from the hall's main doors, interrupting the proceedings once again. The doors swing open, revealing a brilliant light. A new, and very important, player has just entered the game. It's Laya, commander of the Blue Holy Spear Knights, flanked by 2 of her subordinates. Klein instantly recognizes her. She was at the swordsmanship demonstration, but what is she doing here now? The nobles whisper amongst themselves, questioning what business a commander of the Folwyvern family's knight order has in this affair. Duke Heinkel answers for her. He permitted it. He explains that since Dalton had received a mission in her knight order, she has the right to attend the meeting. As an attendant takes her cloak, Laya's piercing gaze sweeps across the room. Her gaze lands directly on Klein, and for a moment, they just stare at each other across the hall. Laya calmly asks for a private word with Lord Klein. Our boy is completely taken aback. Why her? And why him? Duke Heinkel thinks for a moment before granting his permission, but tells them not to take too long. Klein reluctantly agrees, though he internally grumbles about how frustrating knights always are. But then he stops. This isn't a frustration, it's an opportunity. He quickly analyzes the situation. There can only be 3 reasons she wants to see him: for verification, out of suspicion, or to test him. Whatever her reason is, it doesn't matter. He's already set his goal, and he has no intention of backing down now. He follows her out of the main hall, his mind racing. Whether it's the Folwyvern family or anyone else, he's determined to turn this situation to his advantage. An attendant shows them to a private room, and the heavy doors click shut behind them. The moment they're alone, Laya's entire demeanor changes. She takes a powerful step forward, closing the distance between them in an instant. Her lips part slightly as she leans in close, her voice a low whisper. Her eyes lock onto his, and she looks at him. In a move that no one, especially not Klein, could have ever predicted, she slams one hand against the wall, trapping him, her leg pressing against his. Their faces are inches apart. Klein is sweating, his mind completely blank with shock, while Laya looks dead serious as she asks if she can touch him. This is Laya Ren Folwyvern, the eldest daughter of one of the continent's 3 great duchies. She's also the master of spearmanship and knight commander of the Blue Sacred Spear Knights. In short, she's a certified badass. And we get a quick reminder of just how badass she is. In a flashback to the Western Forest monster suppression, we see her facing down an entire horde of snarling, red-eyed orcs. They swarm her from all sides, axes raised, but Laya doesn't even flinch. She stands alone, a single warrior against an army of monsters. With a flash of her spear, the battle begins. She moves like lightning, her weapon a blur of blue energy as she meets the wave head-on. And when the dust settles, she is the only one left standing, amidst the fallen beasts. She single-handedly exterminated a horde of high-ranking monsters, all by herself. So when this absolute unit of a warrior wants a word with you, you listen. Back in the present, she gives Klein a cold look over her shoulder, telling him to hurry up and follow her. Our boy is a bit taken aback by her chilly demeanor. As they walk, she snaps at him not to try and act friendly, reminding him that they aren't even real family anyway. Ouch. Cousin zoned before he even said anything. Klein recalls what his father told him. His aunt is Duke Paul Wyvern's second wife, making Laya his cousin. A close family tie. On paper, at least. But as Klein knows, Laya is the daughter of the Duke's first wife. Biologically speaking, they don't share a single drop of blood. They're complete strangers. Once they're in a private room, Laya announces that what she's about to do is purely out of personal curiosity. Klein has no idea what's coming. And then bam! In a move straight out of a romance novel, she slams him against the wall. Their faces are mere inches apart. Klein is sweating bullets while Laya looks dead serious as she whispers her very strange question. Can she touch him? Klein screams, asking her what she means. Why would she suddenly want to touch him? Not one for pleasantries, Laya ignores his question, tells him to give her his hand, and grabs it before he can protest. She begins a surprisingly thorough inspection of his hand, noting that it has a soft and smooth texture, without a single scar or blister. It's like a baby's hand, she thinks. Klein's mind is racing, a combination of fear and total confusion. Why is this terrifyingly strong woman so interested in feeling up his hand? Laya explains her logic. While some well-trained swordsmen might not have calluses, their hands are never truly soft. The grip on a hilt hardens specific areas, like under the index finger, or the inside of the thumb. Tendon, she says, can't lie. Her eyes lock onto his, her test complete. She asks, "You haven't used a sword, have you?" She presses her point. Just by looking at his hands, she can tell there's absolutely no evidence of him ever wielding a sword. So how did he defeat Dalton and 20 mercenaries? Her mind races to the only logical conclusion. Could it be that he used some other power? But before she can finish her thought, Klein shoves her away, breaking the intense atmosphere. He's tired of her games. He decides to go on the offensive, a smirk playing on his lips. He sarcastically asks if she's going to accuse him of being Archimon too. This catches her off guard, but Klein can see it in her eyes. This isn't just curiosity. She's gauging his reaction, testing him. He knows he's in a verbal minefield. Silence is an admission, and hesitation is confirmation. He realizes the only way out is to be more confident and crazier than she is. So, with all the unearned confidence in the world, he leans in with a smug grin and asks, "Yeah, what if I am?" Laya just scoffs. Him? Archimonde? She thinks the idea is ridiculous. As if that's even possible. And then she delivers a critical hit that Klein never saw coming. She looks him up and down and calls him a brat. A brat? Klein's entire GigaChat persona shatters into a million pieces. He was ready for accusations, threats, maybe even a fight, but not this. He stammers, hoping he misheard her, but she confirms it with a cold stare. Nope, she said brat, and she'll happily say it again. She then proceeds to absolutely roast him. He's too small to be Archimonde, his proportions are bad, and his voice and build lack any presence. The verbal assault is relentless. In a word, he's a little brat. The internal damage is too severe, and Klein's soul has left his body. Laya concludes her takedown. He's neither Archimonde nor a swordsman. But then, she drops a bombshell. If someone like him, a powerless brat, could actually defeat a knight, then she'd give him her lips. Klein is left speechless, trying to process this sudden and very unexpected offer. A kiss? What? His brain is completely fried from the emotional whiplash. He's unable to think rationally, wondering if this is some bizarre political maneuver or a form of bribery. Having thoroughly confused and humiliated him, Laya turns to leave, saying they'll be late for the meeting. But she pauses by the balcony, gazing out at the setting sun. She adds one final cryptic comment. Archimonde would never. And with that, she leaves him hanging. What would Archimonde never do? We don't get an answer as she walks away, leaving a bewildered Klein to follow. They re-enter the main hall, their strange and intense conversation finished. The nobles are waiting. As he walks, Klein reflects on his situation. He admits he was too complacent. His reputation as the nuisance who was locked away for 7 years precedes him. Of course, no one would believe his claim of self-defense. They just see the problem child. His father, Duke Heinkel, immediately asks what he and Laya discussed in private. But Klein has a more direct approach in mind. Instead of answering, he pulls out a sword from his waist, shocking everyone, especially Laya. With a mighty crash, he slams the sword's point into the stone floor, the sound echoing through the silent hall. The entire assembly is stunned into silence, their eyes wide with shock at his bold and aggressive display. The tip of the blade is aimed squarely at Count Delkin. Klein announces that if they won't believe his words, he'll just have to prove his innocence himself. He declares they will settle this like men, the traditional northern way. He challenges the Count to a trial by combat. The Count can only stare in abject terror, unable to believe what he's hearing. For those who not know, a trial by combat is an ancient northern judicial method, used when a clear verdict can't be reached. There are no restrictions on weapons or techniques. It is a duel where anything goes. The outcome of the fight determines the official verdict. It's a brutal but decisive way to settle a dispute. Count Conwell looks like he's just seen a ghost. A trial by combat? He stammers, completely blindsided, demanding to know why Klein would resort to such a drastic and archaic tradition. Klein lays out his reasons with chilling calm. He reminds the Count that even with evidence that Dalton attacked first, the Count still tried to frame him. In that process, you insulted both me and my mother. Before the Count can even process this bombshell, Klein cuts him off with a dagger-like stare, telling him to hurry up and decide. After all, he wouldn't want to keep everyone else waiting, would he? The peanut gallery on the balcony is absolutely living for this drama. Murmurs ripple through the nobles. It's been a long time since they've seen a trial by combat, and they are ready for a show. The pressure mounts on the sweating Count, and just when it seems this couldn't get more official, Duke Heinkel weighs in with a grim expression. He declares that a tradition passed down since the first generation cannot be ignored. With his full authority as the head of the family, the Duke guarantees that the duel's outcome will be the final verdict, and in a massive power move, he renders all previously presented evidence completely void. Suddenly, the Count's fear melts away, replaced by a greedy realization. If all evidence is void, and this is a fight to the death, it's not a threat. It's a golden opportunity to legally eliminate the family's #1 problem child. The Count gets a nasty look in his eye. He feigns concern, asking if the young master will be all right, smugly reminding everyone that Klein has no mana. I'm planning to send another knight in my stead. But Klein's calm response tells him, it doesn't matter. He just tells the Count to get ready to watch another one of his lackeys get butchered, just like Dalton was. The absolute disrespect. The Count, seething but confident, accepts. The duel will take place in 4 days. The gauntlet has been thrown down. As Laya watches from the side with an unreadable expression, we get a peek into Klein's true intentions. This isn't just about clearing his name. He's using this duel as a stepping stone to show these branch family bastards who's really in charge and to completely overhaul the entire family. Later that night, the decision is already causing waves within the main family. Inside the mansion, a voice explodes with rage, screaming, "Absolutely not!" It's his older brother Delane, and he is completely losing it. He confronts Klein, who's just sitting casually, and screams at him, asking if he's out of his mind. A trial by combat? He could die. Klein, looking bored out of his mind, just lets out a tired sigh. He waves off his brother's concern, coolly stating that their father has already given his permission, so it's a done deal. Delane is absolutely stunned. Their father, the Duke, actually agreed to this suicide mission? He can't believe his ears. In a desperate attempt to protect his little brother, Delane offers to step in as his champion, reminding him that the rules of the duel allow for a substitute. He appeals to their family's pride, reminding Klein that the Rhineland family rules the North for one reason only: the strength of their father, the strongest swordsman, and Delane himself, the heir and successor to that strength. But Klein just looks up at him, completely unimpressed. With his arms crossed, he coldly asks his brother to wake up. He spells it out for Delane. If he, the official heir of Rhineland, were to fight and be killed, it would give the Vultures and the Branch families a legitimate opportunity to tear their family apart. It's too risky. Klein's internal monologue reveals his frustration. He knows his brother is right, but he's tired of being unable to do anything simply because he's the heir. This duel is a necessary risk he must take to change his reputation. He stands his ground, telling Delane that he has no reason to yield this to him. This is his fight, and his chance to prove himself. And then we get a surprisingly tender flashback. Delane remembers the day Klein was born. He was so overjoyed to have a little brother that he came running to the nursery in a heartbeat. He recalls seeing the tiny baby for the first time. And in his young eyes, he wasn't just a baby. He was an angel. Back in the present, Delane's voice is thick with emotion. He tells Klein that it doesn't matter if they have different mothers. He is his brother, period. He grabs Klein by the shoulders, his desperation palpable. He explains how he already lost him to the Holy Order for 7 agonizing years, and he only just got him back. The thought of losing him again in a reckless duel is unbearable. A single tear escapes and rolls down Delane's cheek as he pleads with his brother. For the first time, we see a crack in Klein's stoic facade. He's genuinely shocked to see his brother crying, unable to comprehend the depth of Delane's emotion. But this heartfelt moment is cut short when Dunkel enters the room, apologizing for the interruption. He has an announcement. Count Conwell has designated his champion. His name is Randall. Klein pushes his brother's hand off his shoulder, his attention now fully on his opponent. He asks who this Randall is. Dunkel explains that Randall is an excommunicated knight from the Empire, a warrior who made a great and terrible name for himself on the battlefield. And we get a taste of just how he earned that reputation as the doors to a blood-soaked tavern swing open in a flashback. The reason for his excommunication from the knightly order? A simple, chilling diagnosis: uncontrollable bloodlust. This guy isn't just a tough opponent. He's a monster who enjoys the thrill of the kill. The scene is a complete massacre. Randall sits alone amidst the carnage he created, the sole conscious person in a room full of bodies. He then gulps down a drink down his throat. The champion Randall considers his new opponent, the young master of Rhineland. A twisted smile plays on his lips as he thinks to himself, "It's been a while since I've heard the screams of a little boy." This is the certified psychopath Klein has to face in 4 days. Before the duel, Klein retrieves his weapon from Dunkel. While handing him the sword, Dunkel confirms he made the sword exactly to Klein's specifications, but he offers a grave warning. Klein must be careful, as the blade is specially designed to shatter the instant it clashes with a mana-infused sword. Klein isn't the least bit concerned. He simply takes the sword and says that it's good. With his deceptively fragile weapon in hand, our boy is ready to face his opponent. The 4 days pass in a flash, and the day of the trial by combat is finally here. Dressed to the nines, Klein strides into the arena alone, looking calm and collected. The crowd goes wild. They can't believe the mannerless young master actually had the guts to show up for a fight to the death. Watching from the VIP seats are Duke Heinkel and a gleefully smug Count Conwell, who laughs at Klein's audacity. Conwell turns to the Duke with fake concern, asking if he's really okay with this. He boasts that his champion is a knight from the Empire, a warrior who will be a handful for the Duke's mannerless son. He even has the nerve to suggest it's not too late to swap Klein out for his much stronger brother, Delane. The Duke, however, remains as stoic and silent as a statue. Down below, Klein scans the empty arena, wondering where his opponent is. He asks aloud if the guy hasn't come out yet. Suddenly, a massive, menacing shadow with glowing red eyes falls over him. With a ground-shaking thud, a hulking figure leaps into the arena, cracking the stone floor with his landing. And there he is. Conwell's champion, the excommunicated knight and certified psychopath, Randall. A grotesque smile spreads across his scarred face as he asks if he's looking at Lord Klein. He remarks that Klein is much younger than he'd heard. The beast leans in, his shadow engulfing Klein. He comments on how thin Klein's arms are, then wonders aloud what kind of sound his neck will make when it snaps. Then, with blinding speed, Randall's giant paw clamps down on Klein's shoulder. But Klein is even faster. In a fluid motion, he twists away and leaps backward, creating distance between himself and the monster. The spectators are completely baffled by the move. They wonder if he just ran away. Conwell seizes the opportunity to mock Klein in front of the Duke, asking if he can really handle a duel when he's acting so terrified before the fight has even begun. Randall smirks, also thinking he's spooked the young master, muttering about how terrified the kid already looks. But it wasn't fear. Klein was just startled. The sudden grab triggered a traumatic memory of that bastard priest who tortured him at the Holy Order. He momentarily panicked. a conditioned reflex from years of abuse. Cursing the priest as a useless bastard, Klein refocuses on the present. From her seat in the stands, Laya watches the tense standoff with a keen eye. Her subordinate warns her to leave before Lady Helion finds out. But Laya isn't going anywhere. That woman isn't her mother, she says. Besides, she's got a personal stake in this. She remembers her own words, that if Klein beats that night, she'll give him her lips. She shakes off the embarrassing flashback. She has something she needs to confirm in this fight. Back in arena, Klein tries to play off his flinch, telling the brute that he's had a stiff neck lately so he'd better not touch his shoulder. But Randall is already reaching for him again. Losing his patience, Klein snaps, telling the perverted bastard he told him not to touch him. With pure venom in his voice, he asks if Randall's ears are stuffed with muscles too. He then lands a critical hit, remarking that Randall's simple-mindedness is exactly why the Empire abandoned him. The insult clearly strikes a nerve. Randall's anger quickly melts into a sick, twisted grin. That's excellent, he hisses. The fouler Klein's mouth is, the more he'll have to scream with it later. With a savage roar, Randall unleashes a devastating punch aimed right at Klein's head, but Klein is ready for it. As the fist flies towards him, his hand darts to a button on his suit. Randall's punch connects with the ground, completely shattering the stone floor and creating a massive crater. The raw power is insane, but his target is nowhere to be seen. Randall looks up in confusion. All he finds is a scrap of Klein's jacket, which he picks up from the dust. The crowd is in an uproar, stunned by the destructive force of the punch. Then they realize something impossible. Lord Klein has completely disappeared. Randall, now stripped down for a real fight, stands in the crater he created, searching for his opponent. Whoosh! In a blur of motion, Klein reappears behind the beast, having used his jacket as a decoy to escape. Now in just his vest and shirt, he lands gracefully, sword in hand, looking utterly unfazed. He lets out a quiet breath. That psycho has a nasty temper, he thinks. He knows a head-on clash is impossible. A single hit from that massive body would tear him apart. He acknowledges that this isn't a situation where he can afford to relax for even a second. Watching from the stands, even crowd is on the edge. They mutters that he dodged well, but wonders how he's supposed to beat a monster whose lightest touch could shatter his bones. From the stands, Delane looks on with concern for his brother. He flashes back to their last conversation, remembering how he'd offered to take Klein's place in the duel. But Klein had refused, calmly explaining that if Delane, the heir, were to fight and die, it would give their enemies a legal excuse to dismantle the Rhineland family. Back in the present, Randall renews his assault, swinging his massive scimitar with bone-crushing force. Klein prepares to meet the attack, his own frail-looking sword at the ready. The brute continues his relentless onslaught, but Klein is surprisingly agile, dodging and parrying the heavy blows. But Randall's sheer size and power are overwhelming. He manages to grab Klein by the ankle, yanking him off his feet. With a sadistic laugh, he swings Klein through the air and slams him into the ground with terrifying force. A jagged streak of light erupted beneath Klein as he slammed his sword into the ground, using the blade as a makeshift brake to stay upright. Randall raises a fist, ready to deliver the final, decisive blow. As the punch descends, Klein is forced to block with his sword. Randall sneers, taunting the young master. He asks why Klein doesn't just use his famous necromancy, calling him the Great Archmond. Klein grits his teeth, the strain showing on his face as he desperately holds back the overwhelming power. Suddenly, Randall's taunting stops. A look of pure confusion crosses his face. Something is wrong. For Klein, the mockery has gone too far. A flicker of cold amusement crosses his face. He thinks to himself how annoying this all is. For a split second, he contemplates dropping the act and just using his necromancy to kill everyone here. As the thought crosses his mind, his eyes begin to glow with a terrifying purple light, his true power leaking out. Randall is paralyzed. A wave of indescribable, soul-crushing killing intent washes over him, a pressure he's never felt before. The giant warrior, who was just acting like an apex predator, jumps backward. With pure instinct, he begins to sweat profusely. What was that just now? There was nothing there, but he felt an ominous aura that made his very soul tremble. A single tear of pure terror rolls down his cheek. He had never felt such primal fear in his entire life. Behind Klein, the spectral image of a grim reaper materializes, an avatar of his immense necromantic power. Even Count Conwell is confused, wondering why his champion has suddenly stopped moving. Duke Heinkel, however, watches his son with an unreadable expression, his gaze sharp and focused. But just as quickly as it appeared, the aura vanishes. Klein calms himself, deciding to see this through as planned. He reassures the petrified Randall that he won't use necromancy. He is a Rhineland, he declares, and this is a place to prove himself, with a sword. The Duke's eyes widen slightly at his son's declaration of pride. Klein's brother can only whisper his name in disbelief, seeing a side of him he never knew existed. Klein's declaration echoes through the arena, and the once skeptical crowd erupts into a thunderous roar, chanting Lord Klein's name. Count Conwell looks like he's just seen a ghost, utterly flabbergasted by this impossible turn of events. Randall, still shaken, tries to rationalize the terrifying pressure he felt. He tells himself it must have been a coincidence, that he's still leagues above this kid in strength. To reaffirm his dominance, he infuses his entire body with mana, his skin glowing a menacing red. He monologues that the strength of Imperial swordsmanship lies in not holding back, in pushing every sense to its absolute limit. Veins bulge across his body as he channels his power. His very blood seems to boil as he prepares for an all-out attack. With an explosive burst of speed, he charges towards Klein. He unleashes a savage flurry of slashes, screaming for the Rhineland brat to die. But as the attack comes, Klein's world slows to a crawl. He can see it. His eye, glowing with a purple, star-like pattern, cracks open. He can perfectly perceive Randall's technique, his mana capacity, and the arc of his blade. To him, the savage knight is moving in slow motion, his every move laid bare. He weaves through the storm of red slashes, dodging each one by a hair's breadth. Randall's frustration mounts. He screams that Klein is dodging like a damn fly, unable to land a single hit. With a final, desperate roar, he puts every last ounce of his strength into one last, powerful swing, as the dust from Randall's missed attack begins to settle. The brute looks around, confused. Klein has vanished from his sight. He disappeared? Randall wonders if he actually read every single trajectory of his sword in that short amount of time. But it's too late. Klein reappears in mid-air, directly behind the hulking knight. With a smirk, he points out his opponent's fatal flaw. With a body that size, his back is completely exposed. He raises his blade, now glowing with a brilliant purple light, and unleashes the Rhineland family's secret technique, Meteor Sword. The knights in the crowd, including Delane and the Duke, recognize the legendary swordsmanship instantly. Randall lets out an inhuman scream of agony as the blade bites deep into his back, blood spraying into the air. This makes no sense. This bastard. He doesn't have any mana, so how the hell is he doing this? Watching from the stands, Laya's subordinate turns to her, his face a mask of utter shock and disbelief. Laya can only stare, her face flushed and her heart pounding in her chest. Just you wait, girl. Our boy's gonna burn a whole lot of calories with you later. The scene flashes back to a conversation between Duke Heinkel and his trusted aide Dunkel. The Duke confesses that, in a normal situation, he would have stepped in to stop the duel himself. Dunkel looks on, concerned, as the Duke admits that acting on personal feelings would only tarnish the Rhineland family's prestige even further. Duke points out the grim reality of the situation, stating that against a knight from the Empire, Klein stands absolutely no chance of winning. Dunkel asks then, why did you accept the duel? Duke states that he did so because Klein had stepped up to defend the honor of his late mother. He clenches his fists in anguish, lamenting his own powerlessness. He couldn't save his son from being falsely branded as Archmond and exiled, so he feels he has no right to stop him now. Dunkel, however, attempts to reassure the distraught father, telling him that he needn't worry. With a look of quiet confidence, Dunkel reminds the Duke of one crucial fact about his son, which Duke doesn't know. Young Master Klein, he states, does not fight losing battles. Back in the present, the aftermath of Klein's meteor sword technique is clear. A deep, bloody gash runs across Randall's massive back. Duke Heinkel's eyes are wide with disbelief. He can only whisper his son's name, stunned by the impossible sight before him. To understand this feat, one must understand the philosophy behind the northern swordsmanship of Rhineland. Their techniques are symbolized by the cold, efficient steel of their blades. Their style stands in stark contrast to the Imperial swordsmanship, which is like a lion hunting a gazelle. Imperial swordsmanship is pure predation, a philosophy of overwhelming the opponent with brute force. It relies on unleashing a massive torrent of mana all at once to completely crush the enemy. The Rhineland style, on the other hand, is one of temperance, always watching, always waiting, for the perfect opportunity to present itself. It is the way of the eagle, a master of efficiency and precision. The eagle waits patiently for its opponent to reveal an opening, then strikes with lethal accuracy, expending the absolute minimum amount of energy. This is the very essence of the technique Klein has just displayed. He explains that it is the ultimate swordsmanship, designed to draw maximum efficiency from minimum mana. A faint smirk crosses his lips as he reveals his secret. This is how he, a person with no mana, can still wield his family's legendary techniques. While it may lack raw power, it's more than enough to put down a lumbering oaf like Randall. The brute, however, is seething with rage. The condescension from the man he just had at his mercy is too much to bear. He grits his teeth, drool dripping from his sadistic grin as he calls Klein a little rat. With a primal roar that shakes the arena, Randall's body erupts in a violent, crimson aura. His muscles bulge to an inhuman size as he channels every last drop of his power for one final, devastating attack. The crowd shrinks back in terror from the immense pressure washing over them. Count Conwell's eyes go wide with a mix of shock and excitement. He recognizes this technique. It's Randall's ultimate skill, a mana burst that instantly seals an opponent's movements. The wave of red mana floods the battlefield, a terrifying display of power designed to paralyze Klein where he stands. Yet Klein watches the spectacle with a look of utter calm, as if this is all just a minor inconvenience. Randall lunges, screaming that he will be the one to win this duel, his mana-infused scimitar poised to strike Klein down. From the stands, a horrified Delane screams out a warning to his younger brother. The massive glowing blade descends upon Klein, a seemingly unstoppable force of destruction. But we're shown an encounter just before the battle, Dunkel presenting him with a peculiar sword. This sword, he was told, was specially crafted to be brittle. It was designed to shatter the very moment it met a mana-infused blade. Back in the present, reality follows the script perfectly. With a loud crack, Klein's sword breaks apart upon impact. Randall's face twists into a mask of pure maniacal glee. With Klein disarmed, the fight is over. His powerful swing cuts through the air, missing Klein entirely as the young master uses the impact to slip inside his opponent's guard. But this was no accident. A wicked smirk spreads across Klein's face, his purple eye glowing with dark power. He declares that the true weapon to hunt Randall is now finally complete. A single white feather, symbolizing the eagle of Rhineland, gently floats down. The lion, embodying Randall's brute strength, looks up at the feather in confusion. Its eyes track the feather's descent, oblivious to the danger it's in. As the feather lands, the massive, predatory shadow of the eagle falls over the lion, sealing its fate. In the arena, Klein clutches the hilt of his broken sword. In a flash, Klein bypasses Randall's defenses and slices off the Randall's arm. His arm flies in the air, spraying blood. His scimitar, once a symbol of his power, clatters uselessly to the ground. From the stands, Duke Heinkel's voice booms, sharp and final. He declares, "That's enough. The duel is over." Dunkel is also stunned, but slowly, a look of profound understanding dawns on his face as he pieces together Klein's genius strategy. Klein stands over the fallen knight, the victor. The arena is shrouded in a stunned silence. Randall collapses to his knees, screaming in agony as dark, corrupted blood pours from his arm. The medical team rushes onto the field, frantically trying to stop the bleeding and save the dying man's life. Klein peers down at the gruesome scene, his expression unreadable. He casually wonders if Randall's arm can even be reattached. As medics scramble to apply healing magic, one of them confirms the worst. The damage is too severe. All they can do now is prepare a prosthetic arm for the fallen knight. Klein observes with a cold detachment, musing that even after 200 years, healing magic has barely advanced. His musings are cut short as his father, Duke Heinkel, approaches him from behind. The Duke's face is a mask of grim concern. He looks his son in the eye and asks a heavy question. Does he feel nothing after seeing a severed limb? Caught off guard, a single bead of sweat rolls down Klein's cheek. He's momentarily forgotten his role, realizing his detached, archman-like demeanor is not something Klein should have. He quickly tries to recover, awkwardly scratching his head and wondering if he should put on an act and pretend to be scared. Elsewhere, Count Conwell is in a full-blown panic. He can't believe his champion has fallen, wailing about the immense fortune he spent to hire the supposedly invincible knight. Dunkel steps forward, his voice firm and steady. He reminds the hysterical Count of their agreement. He must admit his wrongdoing and submit to the victor's demands. Conwell, however, is consumed by rage and loss. He screams his refusal, declaring that he's already lost his son and his knight, and he will concede nothing. But his tantrum is cut short as an unseen slash cuts off the Conwell's neck. Then camera pans to the man who did this, our boy Klein. A crushing pressure bears down on Conwell, forcing him to his knees. He's unable to move or speak. The Count's eyes widen in abject terror, his mind reeling. He claws at his throat, gasping for breath as he wonders, "I definitely thought my neck was sliced off." Klein leans in close, his voice a low, chilling command. He orders Conwell to confess his sins before the Master of the North and kneel to beg for forgiveness. A terrifying purple energy erupts around them. Klein's voice echoes with dark power as he declares that Conwell will be crushed by the weight of his sins, and he will have an eternity to repent for them. This is no ordinary intimidation. Klein is using Dead Man's Voice, a forbidden technique exclusive to necromancers that instills soul-deep terror into the living. The mental assault is overwhelming. Conwell's mind is flooded with visions of death and despair, a horrifying reaper sealing his fate. He begins to tremble uncontrollably, his sanity cracking under the immense psychological pressure. Klein stares down at the broken man, his expression as cold as the northern winds. Weeping and groveling in the dirt, the once arrogant Count begs for mercy, his voice choked with sobs. He confesses all of his transgressions, admitting to his plot against Klein, and, most heinously, to insulting the memory of Klein's late mother, the Grand Duchess Claire. Watching from the stands, a nobleman trembles in fear. He whispers in disbelief, shocked to see a pillar of the Rhineland branch family crumble so utterly. With justice served, Klein raises the hilt of his shattered sword high. This victory is not an end, but a declaration that his story is just beginning. He addresses the entire arena, his voice ringing with newfound confidence and power. He declares himself the rightful challenger and victor of this trial by combat. "I am Klein Rhineland, the son of Grand Duchess Claire Ladalasis, and the North's strongest knight, Heinkel Rhineland." The scene then shifts to a dark, solemn cathedral, where a shadowy figure enters, his purpose unknown. Inside, Cardinal Maroc is deep in prayer, his hands clasped before a statue of the God of Light. The cardinal prays for guidance, asking the heavens to watch over them as they walk a perilous and painful path into the darkness. The visitor is none other than the priest Garrison, striding down the echoing hall. Cardinal Marok greets him, noting his solemn tone. He asks Garrison what has transpired to bring him here in such a state. Garrison reports that their surveillance target was attacked by a necromancer and a horde of undead. He insists that he wants to verify the situation, but the cardinal is unnervingly calm. He tells Garrison not to worry, revealing that the necromancer attack was all part of their plan. He goes on to explain that the necromancer was dispatched in cooperation with the Empire, a pawn in a much larger game. The cardinal reveals his twisted plan. By using the fear of necromancers, they will drive the terrified masses back into the arms of the Holy Order. He rationalizes that a few sacrifices are a small price to pay to revive the Order's power and spread God's will. As he finishes his sanctimonious speech, his words turn into a strangled gasp. Garrison Veerman has grabbed the cardinal by the throat, lifting him into the air with one hand. With cold fury in his eyes, Garrison condemns Murok, declaring him a disgrace, who has fallen for petty politics and made deals with heretics. Murok struggles desperately, his pleas for help silenced by Garrison's iron grip. His eyes bulge, and with a sickening crunch, Garrison crushes the cardinal's head, putting a brutal end to his corrupt schemes. He drops the lifeless body without a second thought, his duty done. Another figure emerges from the shadows. The man asks if he feels any better now. Walking past the carnage with an unnerving smile is Polyman El, the Archbishop of the Holy Order himself. The Archbishop calmly notes that Garrison has killed more of their own clergymen than any necromancer ever has. Garrison turns to face him, his expression grim as he asks if this was your doing. The Archbishop continues his leisurely stroll through the blood-soaked hall, admitting that while it wasn't his direct order, he did authorize the purge. He tells Garrison that he's brought important information regarding their surveillance target. Garrison, fuming with anger, lunges forward with a punch, but Archbishop disappears into thin air. Appearing behind Garrison, Polyman explains that necromancy always leaves a trace, and this vial contains the remnants of the dark magic used by the necromancer Garrison recently killed. The vial, however, contains two distinct liquids, indicating the presence of two different types of necromancy. The Archbishop explains that one trace is from soul-returning arts, a technique being researched by the Empire. The other, however, is from the original form of necromancy, the kind that manipulates not corpses, but souls. Garrison listens, his mind piecing together the new information. The startling conclusion is that there were two separate necromancers at the scene of the attack. He tells Garrison to listen carefully, for this changes everything. Your surveillance target, the second son of the Rhineland family. Klein Rhineland is a necromancer. The revelation finally shatters Garrison's composure. Somewhere on a dark and stormy night, deep within the territory of the fallen Count Conwell, in a dark cave, a lone miner strikes at a shimmering mana stone, his pickaxe echoing in the silence. He works tirelessly, the clang of metal on stone the only sound besides the pouring rain. But as he pauses to wipe his brow, an ominous shadow looms over him, a hand reaching out from the darkness. The miner turns, his face a mask of pure terror as he realizes he's no longer alone. His scream is swallowed by the storm as he plummets into the depths of the mine shaft. Meanwhile, back at the Rhineland estate, Emily the maid is in a state of sheer panic. She's accidentally crafted a crude doll in the spitting image of her young master Klein. Across the room, Klein is engrossed in a book, oblivious to his maid's frantic flailing. It's been 1 week since Klein's monumental victory in the trial by combat. He reflects on his triumph, using the forbidden dead man's voice, to extract a full confession from Count Conwell, and with the hilt of his shattered sword held high, he declared his return to the world, a moment he thought would earn him the respect he deserved, but the reality is far less glamorous. Despite his powerful mind, his 15-year-old body is struggling to keep up, leaving him completely drained. Back in his study, Emily pouts, complaining to Klein that he's mean for always playing by himself. Klein deadpans that he's reading a book, but Emily cheekily retorts that reading a novel is still a form of playing. Klein falls silent, a slight smirk on his face. She has no idea what he's truly reading. He flips open the book, revealing pages filled not with prose, but with arcane diagrams and handwritten notes. This is no novel. It's his personal grimoire, detailing the secrets of anatomy, magic circuits, and the dark arts of necromancy. Taking a calm sip of tea, Klein assesses his current strength. With this body, he can summon 11 skeletons at most, not nearly enough for a real war. But his biggest concern is the priest, Garrison, whose burning hatred for necromancers is a ticking time bomb. Klein knows he must regain his former power before Garrison makes his move. Later in his father's office, Duke Heinkel gives a report. The Duke holds a document detailing sightings of undead near the recently acquired mine. An opportunity has just fallen right into Klein's lap. He immediately volunteers for the extermination mission. The Duke looks at his son with concern, noting that there have already been casualties. But Klein is unshaken, assuring his father that it won't be a problem. He knows his victory in the trial has earned him a new level of trust. And just as he's relishing the thought of a solo mission where he can unleash his powers, a familiar face appears. Dunkel, the Knight Commander, beams at him, announcing that the Duke ordered him along as a bodyguard. Later that night, the two set up camp. While Klein is silently fuming, Dunkel is cheerfully roasting skewers over the fire. He happily offers one to Klein, who reluctantly accepts the well-intentioned meal. Dunkel, ever the conversationalist, tries to make small talk, but Klein just stares at the charred offering. He bluntly calls the skewer a lump of charcoal and tells Dunkel that he'd be more helpful just sitting still. Dunkel can only apologize, scratching his head in embarrassment. It seems the Knight Commander's skills don't extend to the culinary arts. As they sit in silence by the fire, Klein can't help but be a little impressed by Dunkel's resilience. Munching on his burnt meal, Klein thinks back on his past life, where he spent a decade on the run. A little bad cooking is nothing. Dunkel breaks the silence again, this time with a more serious observation. He tells Klein that he's different from other boys his age, noting his hidden talent with the sword and his incredible spirit during the trial. His observations lead him to a wild, almost unbelievable theory, that Klein might be the reincarnation of the legendary demon Archmond. Klein freezes, the food halfway to his mouth. Internally, he's screaming. Dunkel is dangerously close to the truth. He quickly schools his features and warns Dunkel to never ever repeat those words, especially in front of that fanatic priest. Dunkel speaks Archmond was a demon who turned millions into undead. Suddenly the campfire sputters, as if snuffed out by an unseen force. Dunkel looks around, wondering where the sudden gust of wind came from, but Klein's eyes narrow with deadly intent. He glares at Dunkel, his voice low and threatening, warning him to never speak of that matter again. Dunkel is shocked by Klein's sudden hostility, a bead of sweat tracing down his face. Their tense standoff is shattered by a blood-curdling scream from the nearby village. The village is in chaos. A horde of undead shamble through the streets, their grotesque forms terrifying the fleeing citizens. The ghoulish creatures, their eyes glowing with malevolent light, lunge at the helpless villagers. But Dunkel is already moving, a golden flash of light as he carves through the undead, creating a path for the people to escape. He calls out in alarm as one of the creatures slips past his guard, heading straight for Klein. However, Klein is perfectly calm. With a flash of purple energy, he bisects the undead with a single, fluid motion. He turns to Dunkel with an unimpressed look, telling him to focus on saving the people. Dunkel, acknowledging the order, redoubles his efforts, protecting the townsfolk from the relentless assault. With the immediate threat neutralized, Dunkel introduces Klein to the survivors as the second son of the Rhineland family. Klein surveys the scene, the stench of death in the air. He recognizes the reanimation magic. It's the same kind that was used on the assassins in the forest. A terrified villager explains that the undead started appearing 2 months ago. After Count Conwell restricted access to the mines, people began to disappear shortly after. The man's voice cracks as he delivers the most devastating news. These undead are not strangers. They are the missing villagers. Overcome with grief and rage, another man grabs Klein by the collar, demanding to know if he's truly a Rhineland. Dunkel rushes to intervene, but the man shoves him away, his face a torrent of tears and fury. He screams that they pleaded for help from the Rhineland Duke for 2 long months, only to be ignored. Pointing at one of the corpses Klein just put down, the man howls in anguish. That undead was his father, an honest miner. He collapses to his knees, his cries echoing through the desolate town square, asking what they did to deserve this fate. Klein stands over the grieving man, his expression unreadable, a memory of his past life as the Demon King Archmond flashing before his eyes. With a chillingly calm voice, Klein tells him to shut up. His eyes glow with an ominous purple aura. He asks the man why any of this is his fault. It wasn't him who turned their loved ones into monsters. Their anger is misplaced. The villager looks up, his eyes filled with despair. As Dunkel starts to step in, Klein raises a hand, halting him. A brilliant, ethereal blue energy begins to coalesce around his palm. Dunkel watches, bewildered, as Klein begins to chant an ancient incantation. The bodies of the fallen undead start to twitch, bathed in the same ghostly blue light. Klein declares himself the guide for the sorrowful dead, promising to uphold their will. As his voice rings out, the blue energy erupts from his hand, washing over the entire square. From each corpse, a luminous, spectral form rises, the souls of the villagers finally freed from their cursed bodies. Dunkel stares in utter disbelief, recognizing the legendary soul resonance, a sacred art thought lost for 200 years. The grieving son watches, tears streaming down his face, as the spirit of his father gives him a final, peaceful look before dissolving into light. The liberated souls ascend into the night sky, a beautiful, tragic spectacle of light and peace. Having brought peace to the dead, Klein and Dunkel leave the village behind, heading towards the source of the corruption, the mine. As they walk, Dunkel asks what the spirit said to him. Klein answers nonchalantly that they thanked him for their release and pleaded with him to get revenge on their behalf. The word, revenge, strikes a chord with Dunkel, his mind racing back to his earlier comment about Archmond. His expression shifts from awe to suspicion. He stops walking and turns to face Klein. Drawing his sword, he levels the gleaming blade at Klein's neck. His eyes are sharp, his voice deadly serious as he asks the question that has been burning in his mind since the trial. You, who exactly are you? Dunkel flashes back to the day the young master Klein Rhineland returned to the estate. He had been locked away in a monastery for 7 long years, and the staff whispered nervously about the cursed boy who called himself Archmond. But what was most surprising to Dunkel was the look in the child's eyes. It was a pitch-black gaze, a void so empty it was hard to believe it belonged to a young boy. The strangeness began shortly after. One morning, a dead cat was found in the estate's kitchen, sending the maids into a panic. A second one was discovered in the backyard garden, and then a third the following day. The count rose steadily, until a total of 7 cats were found dead across the estate. Wild rumors began to fly among the staff, blaming the cursed bloodline of the young master. Unlike the frantic atmosphere of the estate, Klein remained completely indifferent, spending his days just staring out the window. Everyone suspected him of being the demon Archmond, but Dunkel thought the boy was simply too young to be involved. But his suspicion grew when one night, he saw a light moving through the dark halls. It was Klein, carrying a lantern and heading out of the estate at this late hour. Dunkel wondered where he could possibly be going. He watched from a distance as Klein made his way through the woods, cloak billowing in the wind. Dunkel followed silently, his own footsteps masked by the rustling leaves. He shadowed Klein down a long, dark path. The sound of a crow's caw split the night air, until they arrived at an old, desolate place filled with tombstones. Dunkel watched from the bushes, wondering why on earth Klein would come to the cemetery. He heard a strange scraping sound from behind the tombstones. Peeking closer, Dunkel's eyes widened in shock. It was the young master, but what he was doing was completely unexpected. Dunkel watched, utterly bewildered, as Klein tenderly cared for the very cats that had been found dead. The Knight Commander was speechless, questioning what he was seeing. Klein was performing funeral rites, carefully cleaning and preparing the animals for burial. He explained to a stunned Dunkel that the cats had died from an infectious disease, harmless to humans but fatal to animals. Dunkel tried to protest, saying the boy would ruin his hands, but Klein was resolute. He simply stated that it was a job that someone had to do. Dunkel was left speechless by the boy's unexpected compassion. The flashback ends, and we're back to the present, with Dunkel's blade pressed against Klein's neck. But Klein remains completely calm, his back still turned to the knight. He asks Dunkel if he remembers the first saying of Berkel Rhineland, the founder of their house. Dunkel's resolve wavers as he recites the words. It is one's actions, not their roots, that define a being. Klein points out that this very principle allowed Dunkel, a poor peasant, to become the captain of the knights. It has allowed Klein, the son of a foreign mother, to survive. With the cold steel still at his neck, Klein tells Dunkel that he has spent the most time with him since he left the monastery, so he should be the one to decide. He gives the knight an ultimatum. If Dunkel truly believes he is the demon Archmond, then he should strike him down right now. Dunkel stares, his mind racing. He recalls the image of the young boy compassionately burying the dead animals. With a heavy heart, the Knight Commander lowers his sword. He admits that he hasn't decided yet and isn't convinced, but he makes one thing clear. He declares that the one he serves is the second young master, Klein Rhineland, not some atrocious devil of the continent. Klein turns, a slight, almost speechless. He nonchalantly thanks Dunkel for the compliment. Having settled their differences for now, the pair finally arrives at the mine. Dunkel lights a torch, its flame cutting through the oppressive darkness of the cave entrance. The ground is littered with bones, a clear sign of the death that has taken place here. They venture inside, the torchlight revealing a massive cavern supported by decaying wooden beams. Dunkel remarks that it smells like corpses, and Klein agrees, adding that these ones are moving. Looking down, they spot a group of undead, their bodies shambling aimlessly in the darkness below. Dunkel gets ready for a fight, but Klein raises his hands, a brilliant blue energy crackling around them. From the bones scattered across the cavern floor, a new army begins to rise. Dunkel can only stare in disbelief, as Klein's necromancy summons powerful, armored skeletons. With a single word, Klein gives the order to charge, and his newly formed army descends upon the unsuspecting undead. The skeletons move with terrifying speed and precision, their eyes glowing with malevolent orange light. The lesser undead don't stand a chance, frozen in place as their doom approaches. Klein's creations tear through them, their enchanted limbs and weapons ripping the shambling corpses to shreds. Dunkel is flabbergasted. This was on another level. Klein says he heard the same thing from Dalton's mercenaries when they were ripped apart by these skeletons. The battle is a whirlwind of blue energy and shattered bone as Klein's forces completely overwhelm the enemy. Dunkel calls out to Klein, telling him to follow him. After a moment of walking, Dunkel hears some noise up ahead. He turns to young master, telling him that, by the sound of it, it looks like there are about 40 of them. We're outnumbered. But Klein is already on the move, casting a spell. A blue light envelops the undead on the floors. Dunkel asks what's he doing. Klein simply says he's converting the subdued undead into allies. Now he has a fresh batch of skeletons ready at his disposal. Klein nonchalantly says, well, this should be enough to put up a fight. Dunkel is just speechless. They take a stance at the center of Crossroad. A wave of ghouls rushes forward from all the sides. Klein calmly directs the battle from the rear, issuing commands to his troops. His skeletons carve through the horde, their movements perfectly synchronized. They dash through the remaining enemies, finishing them off with brutal efficiency. Dunkel wipes a bead of sweat from his brow, struggling to comprehend what he just saw. Skeletons are supposed to be low-tier undead, but these move like a highly trained elite army. In a matter of moments, the battle is over. The cavern floor is littered with the destroyed bodies of their enemies. Dunkel is speechless. They just annihilated a force more than 4 times their size without breaking a sweat. With the entrance secured, Klein informs Dunkel that, from here on out, it's just the two of them. He turns to his knight, telling him to believe in him until the very end. The two venture deeper into the mine, the path illuminated by Dunkel's torch. As Dunkel wonders how much further they have to go, a single drop of warm liquid splatters onto his cheek. Looking down at his hand, he realizes it's blood. Suddenly, a faint, pained whisper echoes from the darkness ahead. It's a human voice. Dunkel rushes forward, calling out that they're here to save them. But the voice only repeats a single, haunting plea. "Kill me." He raises his torch, and the light reveals a truly hellish sight. Dozens of villagers are strung up, their bodies being drained of blood for a dark ritual. Dunkel recoils in horror, surrounded by the moaning, tortured souls of the missing villagers. A cold voice suddenly breaks the silence, commending Klein for knowing that they were kidnapped for reanimation magic. A figure emerges from the shadows, their footsteps echoing ominously in the cavern. A woman in a dark, hooded cloak appears before them, her presence radiating immense power. Klein's eyes narrow. He knows this energy. She pulls back her hood, revealing a cascade of crimson hair and a knowing, sinister smile. With a familiar grace, she greets him, saying it's been a while. She looks directly at Klein, her eyes filled with recognition, and addresses him by his true name from a lifelong past, Devil of the Continent, Lord Archman. Klein's eyes widen in utter shock. In a short scene after the trial, Emily presents Klein with a celebratory cookie for his hard-earned victory. The Grand Colosseum stands empty, a testament to the brutal fight that took place. Later, as Klein, Dunkel, and a cookie-munching Emily walk through the halls, a figure watches them from around a corner. Klein senses her presence for a brief moment, but dismisses it. It's Leia. She clutches her chest, her face flushed, as she wonders why she's hiding from the young master. Like hell, we audience don't know. Everyone knows that you're trying to protect your lips. We are briefed on the history of necromancers. Originally, they were seen as those who summoned souls to receive divine oracles. But after that day, the practice became feared and reviled. It all began with the Archimonde incident, a great catastrophe where tens of millions of undead invaded the continent. Led by the powerful necromancer Archimonde, this army of the dead was unstoppable. They neither ate, rested, nor died, and completely shattered all known rules of warfare. The conflict only ended when the great hero, Burkel Rhineland, finally struck down Archimonde himself. In the aftermath, many mages became fascinated with the dark power of necromancy. However, their research was limited, only managing to master simple reanimation magic. As a result, modern necromancers were reduced to mere second-rate magicians, their power a pale imitation of the past. Just like the woman who now stood before Klein and Dunkel, she confidently introduces herself as Pale, a necromancer, before addressing Klein by a name that sends a chill down Dunkel's spine, Lord Archman. The air in the cavern grows thick with tension as Klein and Dunkel face this mysterious woman. Dunkel can only stare, the name, Archman, echoing in his mind, but another sensation quickly grabs his attention. He feels an incredible, overwhelming torrent of mana radiating from Pale. Klein is equally focused, noting how she's masterfully imbued magic directly into her robe. It's a high-level technique that only a select few are capable of. Never one to stand by, Dunkel immediately draws his sword, his loyalty to Klein overriding any fear. He furiously tells Pale not to dare call his young master by the name of such scum, but Klein just watches speechless, being called scum. Pale simply chuckles, dismissing her world-shaking accusation as just a little joke. She playfully apologizes for being rude to the young master of the great House Rhineland, but then her expression hardens. She tells Klein she knows what he truly is. Based on the rumors and the unfamiliar magic she senses from him, she declares that he is definitely a necromancer, just like her. She eyes the sword at his hip, finding it strange for a necromancer to wield such a weapon. Dunkel has had enough of her games. He cuts her off, demanding to know what she did to the captive villagers. He wants to know who put her up to this horrific ritual. Pale scoffs at his questions, a look of condescension on her face. She proclaims that a true necromancer doesn't rely on simple tools like swords. They are masters of a higher power. They command souls and control death itself. To demonstrate, dark, sinister energy begins to flow from her mouth. It surges towards the captive villagers, their bodies still hanging in the darkness. The tortured souls of the villagers are ripped from their bodies, their silent screams echoing through the cavern. Horrifying black tendrils erupt, pulling the very essence of life from the helpless captives. Pale raises her hand, a vortex of souls swirling above her as she prepares to unveil her creation. With a triumphant grin, she promises to show them the meaning of true necromancy. She begins to weave the souls together, forming a swirling orb of pure death energy. "Behold," she screams, "the masterpiece I dedicated my life to!" The dark energy coalesces, taking on a monstrous, hulking form. It crashes to the cavern floor with a ground-shaking thud. Dunkel and Klein can only stare in disbelief at the abomination before them. The knight struggles to comprehend the sight. He's seen the horrors of war, but nothing could have prepared him for this. This monstrous creature, stitched together from the bodies of the villagers, is a cyclops. Pale stands proudly beside her grotesque creation. She coos at the monster, calling it her baby and apologizing for making it wait. With a chillingly sweet voice, she gives her masterpiece a single command: crush those two into a pulp. The cyclops' foot slams down, shaking the entire cavern. In a blur of motion, the creature lunges forward, its massive frame defying its size. Dunkel's eyes widen in alarm at its incredible speed. He screams a warning to the young master, knowing the boy is in mortal danger. But Klein stands his ground, raising a hand as if to stop the behemoth. Dunkel's instincts take over. He can't let his master face this thing alone. But instead, Klein shoves Dunkel out of the path of the Cyclops' crushing blow. The monster's arm swings through the air, sending Klein flying. The force of the impact sends Klein crashing to the ground. Klein lands hard, a trickle of blood running from his lips, but he remains composed. The Cyclops stands over him, its multiple eyes glowing with malice. It raises its foot, ready to stomp Klein into oblivion. But just as its foot descends, Dunkel has thrusted his sword in the Cyclops' leg, blocking the attack with his own body. Gritting his teeth, he pushes back against the immense weight. He glares at the Cyclops, a furious roar escaping his lips. "Don't you dare," he growls. "Don't you dare lay a finger on the young master." The Cyclops is sent stumbling back as its leg is sliced off. Klein looks on, surprised by his knight's unwavering loyalty. Pale, however, is merely intrigued, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. Dunkel lands gracefully before the leg piece. The Cyclops roars in pain. Pale applauds him sarcastically, praising the knight for his splendid strike. But she scoffs at his talent, claiming he can't even leave a scratch on her masterpiece. As if to prove her point, a dismembered limb from the Cyclops begins to twitch and reattach itself. The knight watches in horror as the creature's severed leg grows back in an instant. It lets out another earth-shattering roar, fully regenerated. Dunkel can only curse, realizing the monster's healing ability is insane, but his resolve doesn't waver. He sees Klein pushing himself in danger to save him, a boy with not an ounce of mana to his name. He can't believe he ever suspected such a person of being the demon Archimond. He realizes there's only one way to repay the shame of his doubt. With newfound determination, he unleashes a flurry of golden-hued strikes. He vows to put his life on the line to protect the young master. His blade cuts deep, but the wounds on the Cyclops close up as quickly as he can make them. Pale's laughter echoes through the cave. "Damn it, it's regenerating again!" Dunkel growls in frustration. He desperately hacks away at the monster, but his efforts are futile. He leaps into the air, aiming for what he presumes is the head. "I'll strike its head quickly!" he shouts, bringing his sword down with all his might. His blade connects with a sickening squelch, but the creature barely seems to notice. It simply swats him away like a fly, sending him crashing into the cavern wall. Dunkel is left broken and defeated, his body pinned against the stone. Pale looks on, unimpressed. The sight is beyond her imagination. How weak he is. Through her past of endless, cruel experiments, she had surpassed all known limits of necromancy. She had finally succeeded in creating her own unique variant, a creature no one else could touch. And because of that, she was certain of one thing. This was the power of innate talent. A cackle escapes her lips, a sound of pure madness and pride. She screams that not even the legendary Archimond could have created something so perfect. "So I have it!" she shrieks. "I have surpassed Archimond's knowledge." As she gloats, Cyclops picks up the fallen Dunkel. It opens its mouth wide open to devour him. Just then, a calm voice cuts through the chaos. "Core connection point." It's Klein. He walks forward, completely unfazed. "The second is the core suture," he continues. Pale is dumbfounded, wondering how he could possibly know the secrets to her creation. Klein explains that the suture is the pathway for magic formulas, the knot that binds the corpses and powers its regeneration. He turns to Dunkel. "So how do you kill that thing? Beating on its body like you did is a waste of time." Klein states matter-of-factly. "All it takes is destroying a single core, and it's over." Wiping a bit of blood from his lip, Klein's eyes glow with a menacing purple light. "Then, that core," he asks, "where exactly is it?" Pale's confidence returns in an instant. She explains that a Cyclops' core doesn't stay in one place. It's a vital point directly linked to its death, so it constantly wanders throughout the body, flowing like blood through veins. It's impossible to find because it keeps moving. A smug, vicious grin spreads across her face. "And didn't you hear me earlier?" she taunts. "This is a masterpiece I dedicated my life to creating." She looks down on Klein with utter contempt. "In the face of talent, you are nothing," she declares, unleashing a wave of power. "Crush him," she commands her Cyclops. The beast lunges forward, ready to obey. But as the monster charges, Klein simply asks, "Talent?" The boy recalls memories from a lifelong past. Vivid memories of slicing and destroying thousands upon hundreds of cyclopes. For him, this was just another Tuesday. He had to put into words a sensation that felt as fresh as yesterday. His eyes scan the monster. A network of energy flowing within it becomes visible only to him. His gaze locks onto the moving, glowing core. With a burst of speed and a flash of purple energy, he moves. "I just did it," he says simply. Pale's eyes widen in utter shock and disbelief. In a single, impossibly fast slash, Klein's blade finds its mark, slashing the monster core and Pale in a single strike. The sound of shattering glass echoes as the core is obliterated. As her head is flying, she thinks it's impossible. How did he find the core? Her confidence is broken in an instant. Klein looks down at Pale and asks if this what you dedicated your life for. With a smirk, he declares, "Perhaps you should make it a hobby in your next life." A quiet voice ponders the nature of death. It's often compared to sleep, a release from the burdens of everyday life. Pale, the arrogant necromancer, slowly returns to consciousness. Her eyes flutter open, but the world around her is not the one she knew. She finds herself submerged in a dark, endless liquid. Looking up, she sees countless coffins floating in the abyss. A chilling welcome to the afterlife. She scrambles to her feet in a panic, demanding to know where she is. A colossal, shadowed face looms over her, a being of immense and terrifying power. Terrified, she tries to flee, but the water itself seems to hold her in place. The being reveals himself, clad in skeletal armor and wielding a massive scythe. It's Klein, but transformed into his true form, Archimond, the king of necromancers. He calmly informs her that she still doesn't understand the situation she's in. Pale can only look on in terror as Archimond announces that her judgment is about to begin. He descends upon her, his very presence suffocating the space around them. Pale finally grasps the horrifying reality of her situation. This is the devil of the continent, the beginning and end of all necromancy, standing before her in the flesh. He beckons her closer, a simple gesture she is powerless to resist. Pale begins to sweat, her body moving against her own will. She is dragged through the dark waters, a helpless puppet on the strings of the necromancer king. Archimond begins to list her sins, showing her visions of the innocent people she captured and tortured. The faces of her victims flash before her eyes, their silent screams echoing in this dark realm. He reminds her of the cruel satisfaction she took in their endless suffering. Pale loses her composure, screaming in denial that Archimond is supposed to be dead. As if to mock her, a black substance splatters across her face. Archimond then condemns her for not only torturing the living but for defiling the dead to use as her tools. His eyes are devoid of all mercy as he passes his sentence. He declares that from now on she will become his tool. All around them, the coffins begin to creak open. A terrifying force grabs hold of her, pulling her toward an open casket. She flails helplessly, her strength meaning nothing in this absolute domain. Her arrogant confidence shatters into pure, primal fear. She is dragged, kicking and screaming, into the darkness of the coffin. For a moment, she clings to the edge, her eyes wide with terror. But Archimond shows no mercy, swinging the coffin shut. He looks at her one last time, his glowing eyes promising that this is not the end. He swings his large scythe, slicing the coffin. Her final scream is cut short, lost forever to the void. Pale gasps, jolting awake on the cold floor of the mine. Tears of relief stream down her face as she convinces herself it was all just a horrifying nightmare. Nearby, Dunkel also regains consciousness, dazed and utterly confused. He looks around, seeing the devastation, and Pale, now reduced to nothing but a disembodied head. He can't believe his eyes, utterly baffled by the scene. He struggles to piece together what happened after he was knocked out, only remembering the Cyclops' explosion. He comes to the only possible conclusion. The young master, Klein, defeated the powerful necromancer and her monster all by himself. Pale, however, is not so relieved. She sees Klein approaching and lets out a terrified shriek. Klein kneels down beside her, looking completely unscathed after the battle. He calmly asks if she's finally come to her senses and ready to face reality. But Pale isn't looking at Klein, she's hearing the voice of Archimond. The horrifying truth dawns on her. It wasn't a dream. Klein Rhineland is Archimond. The face from her nightmare overlaps with the boy in front of her. In the reflection of her terrified eyes, she sees the true king of necromancers. As she opens her mouth to scream his name, Klein gently places a finger on her lips. He shushes her with a cold, intimidating calm. A purple aura emanates from him as he tells her he needs information. The ghostly image of Archimond looms behind him as he begins his interrogation. He demands to know everything: who sent her, how many others there are, and what their ultimate goal is. He offers her a simple choice: cooperate and receive a painless death, or resist and be granted eternal life. Pale grits her teeth, understanding the horrific implication of eternal life in her current state. Klein leans closer, his expression making it clear that her torment would be endless if she refuses. The scene shifts. Dunkel is now dutifully writing down everything Klein dictates from the interrogation. It seems Pale chose to cooperate. Klein sits calmly as Dunkel finishes his notes. As Klein stands to leave, Pale's head frantically begs him to wait, asking what will happen to her now that she's told him everything. She screams that she kept her end of the bargain and demands he uphold his. Klein turns, looking back at her, A chilling smirk spreads across his face as he remembers the other half of their deal. Pale's eyes fill with tears of genuine joy, believing her long-awaited death is finally at hand. Klein confirms that he always keeps his promises, conjuring a strange, glowing ball of energy. He holds the mesmerizing orb over her head. She looks up, confused. This doesn't seem like a quick end. From the shadows of the cave, a skittering sound begins, and a swarm of cockroaches appears. They are drawn to the energy, pouring out from every crack and crevice by the thousands. Klein casually informs her that they will be the ones to kill her, a process that might take about a week. Pale can only scream in horror as the swarm descends, consuming her alive. Klein watches dispassionately, coldly thanking her for becoming a useful tool. A single eye stares out from the swarm before being consumed completely by the insects. With the necromancer dealt with, Klein and Dunkel finally leave the accursed mine. Back at the Grand Rhineland estate, the repercussions of the incident are already being felt. Duke Rhineland, Klein's father, reads a disturbing report that has just arrived. It seems the Empire has been secretly unleashing necromancers in the north, and the Holy Order is turning a blind eye. Klein stands before his father, ready to deliver his full report on the incident in the mine. He confirms the report is true, and details the scale of the problem, with entire villages going missing while local nobles are too busy with politics to act. The Duke listens intently before ordering his butler, Berkman, to dispatch the night order to the locations Klein identified. He looks at his son with a newfound respect, praising him for his incredible accomplishment. Klein, ever humble in his new persona, gives all the credit to Dunkel. He mentions their decision to keep the necromancy aspect of the events a secret for now, recalling Dunkel's fervent hatred for the dark arts. The Duke stands, deciding that Klein's actions have earned him more than just praise. Klein looks on, surprised by his father's next move. He is presented with the official token of a Rhineland knight. The Duke overrules any protest, stating that while it may not be enough, Klein will start as an apprentice knight. Klein accepts, pinning the wolf emblem to his suit. This is a crucial step in his plan. The Duke seems pleased with his son's development and finally dismisses him. Having been dismissed, Klein makes his way out of the Duke's office. The heavy doors close behind him, marking the end of one challenge and the beginning of another. Berkman comments on the staggering nature of Klein's feat, battling over 70 undead and an armed necromancer. The Duke then gives a cryptic order: send a letter to his brother. He declares that the genius his brother has been searching for his entire life is right here at the estate. Meanwhile, Klein walks through the halls, musing about his new status as an apprentice knight. He knows the place where the knights are stationed is a classified military zone, off limits to outsiders. This gives him an idea. He smirks, realizing the troublesome priest Garrison, who still suspects him, won't be able to bother him anymore. He reaffirms his quiet resolve to restore the Rhineland family to its former glory. As he contemplates his next move, a small, fast-moving figure barrels down the hall towards him. It's his personal maid, Arin, who tackles him with the force of a cannonball. The impact sends a sickening crack through his spine, and Klein crumples in pain. Klein asks her if her cookie stock is finished. Arin, with cookie crumbs on her face, glares down at him, clearly upset about something more than just snacks. Klein, clutching his back, can only stare in disbelief at the maid. He weakly tells her to go ask the kitchen for more cookies if she's run out. But Arin has bigger news. She urgently tells him that Priest Garrison is here right now. Klein immediately freezes, his brief moment of peace shattered. The one person he was hoping to avoid has come directly to him. He remembers the brutal power of the Garrison the day he killed Dalton. Garrison is not a man to be trifled with, and his suspicions run deep. Klein's brief moment of triumph is cut short by a question, asking if his mission went well. He turns to find the man he's been trying to avoid, standing behind him. The priest tells him that he's been waiting for the young master Klein Rhineland. A frantic search is underway, with a servant screaming out the young master's name. Men scour the estate grounds, desperately trying to find any trace of Klein. The search party reports their failure. The young master is nowhere to be found. One of the men worries that it's almost time for Klein's purification ritual, and he can't believe the boy has vanished. But Klein hasn't vanished. He's perched high in a tree, successfully avoiding his pursuers. He grimaces, recalling the last time Garrison promised forgiveness, only to string him up naked as a punishment. He's not falling for that again. He watches as the search party finally decides to check the mansion, giving him a moment of peace. Night falls over the forest, the sky dark and full of stars. Hours later, Klein is still in the tree, fast asleep on a thick branch. He wakes with a start, drooling slightly, screaming, "No, Garrison, no there!" He looks around, wondering if he dozed off, and assumes the search party has long since given up. Deciding it's safe to head back, he begins his descent from the tree, landing softly on the ground. But his relief is short-lived. He realizes he's not alone. He's landed right in the middle of a family of northern gray bears, massive predators native to the region. Without access to his necromancy, Klein knows he's nothing more than a potential meal for these beasts. Huddled and shivering from the cold, he realizes his only option is to wait for them to leave. His grimaces, both past and present, feels like an endless cycle of running away. He clenches his fist in frustration, his life once again defined by helplessness. Suddenly, his feverish state is broken as he realizes he's being carried. It's Garrison who has the boy slung over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. The priest looks down at him, asking if he's finally conscious. Klein wonders if he froze to death and this is some kind of hell, but Garrison just laughs it off. The priest explains that he found him unconscious in the tree, but Klein is bewildered, asking about the bears. He looks over to see the massive beasts lying on the ground, seemingly asleep with lumps on their heads. Garrison cheerfully informs him that he's already taken care of them. Klein, flustered and burning with a fever, demands to be put down, refusing to be carried by his tormentor. He can't understand why Garrison, the person who wanted him dead more than anyone, would suddenly save him. The priest simply looks on, his expression unreadable. He looks up at the moon and gives a cryptic reply. He says that stars don't create their own darkness, they merely shine where they are. It's the same for young lives. They don't yet know right from wrong. He calls this the future of a young being. Klein is taken aback by the sudden philosophical turn. He bitterly retorts, asking if that's something Garrison should be saying after all the water tortures he's inflicted. Garrison's expression hardens. He continues, stating that if that young being chooses to become darkness itself, if Klein is the true Archimond he's been looking for, then he will kill him personally. Back in the grand hall of the Rhineland estate, the tense standoff between the priest and the young master continues. The priest explains he was away on urgent business with the Holy Order. He reveals that an old friend gave him something interesting, presenting a cross-shaped vial filled with a swirling red substance. Klein's eyes widen in horror. He immediately recognizes it as ectoplasm, an object that can contain spiritual energy, and fears it holds his own magi. Garrison begins his story, recalling the day Klein was attacked in the forest by a necromancer. But Garrison intervened, dealing with the assailant himself with a single, brutal punch. He takes a step forward, his voice low and menacing. He explains that the ectoplasm used at the time detected not just one trace of a necromancer, but two. A cold dread washes over Klein. Though Garrison's voice is calm, the king of necromancers within him can sense the deadly intent. His very instincts, honed over countless battles, are screaming a warning. This man before him is a true monster, a predator of the highest order. Klein quickly assesses his options, questioning if he can handle this opponent with his current limited strength. He considers his ability to copy techniques, but the thought is quickly dismissed. To copy a skill, he'd have to survive seeing it first, an impossible feat against a monster like Garrison. He concludes that fighting is not an option. Garrison looks down at him and gives Klein an ultimatum: use necromancy right now. He calls it a chance, a consideration for their past connections. If it's simple reanimation, it'll just be a report to the Order. But if it's the original form of necromancy that manipulates souls, the kind used by that person, he will not escape death. An ironic smirk plays on his lips as he thinks about this man who tortures him daily in the name of purification. He finds the situation funny, because Garrison reminds him of someone else. Klein explains that he didn't understand it back then, but now he grasps the justice Garrison believed in. Klein clenches his fist, with resolves. He declares that he will decide his own fate. He will not run away anymore. Garrison's expression turns grim. Since Klein refuses to cooperate, he has no choice but to force him. Garrison moves forward with a powerful swing. Klein's mind screams as he realizes he has to dodge this at all costs. He has to evade it, just this once. With a burst of explosive power, he dashes to the side, narrowly avoiding the punch. Garrison watches, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Klein allows himself a brief, triumphant smirk. He did it. The servants and staff in the hall scream in terror at the sudden explosion. They look on, in utter disbelief, shouting that the priest has just attacked the young master. Seeing his opening, Klein reaches for his sword, planning to strike while Garrison is distracted. His hand closes on an empty scabbard. He freezes in shock. His sword is gone. A voice from above asks if he's looking for something. It's Garrison, holding Klein's sword with ease. The priest throws the blade on the ground. Garrison mocks at the concept of a necromancer using a sword. He realizes with a jolt of fear that Garrison intends to kill him right here and now. The priest coldly tells him he won't need something like a sword, and launches another punch. A blinding light erupts from impact. The entire hall is engulfed in the blast, the very structure of the building groaning under the immense force. The terrified servants are thrown back by the shockwave, unable to comprehend the scale of the attack. As the dust begins to settle, Garrison stands calmly amidst the destruction, his fist still clenched. His gaze is cold and resolute, fixed on where Klein once stood. But through the smoke, a new figure emerges, sword drawn and glinting in the light. It's the 7th Duke of the Rhineland family, Heinkel Rhineland, and he demands an explanation from Garrison before his sword cuts him down.